Greetings, this is yours truly, Lord Karo, welcome to my domain. Savior, Reborn. Chapter 1, I don't own Naruto. Masashi Kishimoto-sama owns him. Chapter 1, Gone. Everyone. Gone. Naruto Uzumaki had lost. Madara had killed everyone. His closest friends. His girlfriends. The entire allied shinobi forces. Decimated. Naruto stared at the battlefield and thought. I lost. Naruto thought. What will you do now, Naruto? You said you will save everyone, but it was all bogus, Madara said in the Ten Tails mode. Naruto clenched his fists in anger and spoke. Shut up. Even if they died, I will never give up. Hey kid, you are not going to use that, are you? Kurama asked. Naruto sighed and said, I have to Kurama. I don't have anyone anymore. Even if I die, I will take Madara with me. With that he started making hand signs. Once he finished, he clapped and called out, Reaper Death Seal. The Shinigami came out behind Naruto holding his soul. Naruto ran at full speed towards Madara. He jumped and grabbed Madara. The Shinigami drove its hand through Naruto and pulled out Madara's soul slowly. What are you doing? Madara asked. I am sealing you away in the Shinigami with the Reaper Death Seal so you will never complete your plan. I am also sealing the 10 tails inside me, so it can die with me. The chakra will then split back into the 9 pieces it was made from, and the Biju will be free from ever being sealed again, Naruto explained. Naruto, were the thoughts of all the Biju inside him. Damn you, Naruto Uzumaki. I won't be sealed. Not today. With that, Naruto pulled out the Juubi and Madara. The Shinigami sealed the Juubi and Madara inside Naruto and took Naruto's soul as well. Naruto then fell on the ground with a smile on his face as he thought, the job is done. With that, Naruto died. The Court of Heavenly Life. Damn it. Kami shouted, startling Yami. Kami was never angry unless there was a break in the balance of power. Kami-chan, what's wrong? Yami asked. The child of prophecy has lost against Madara, Kami said, which got Yami confused. You don't normally care about the mortals, Kami-chan. What got you interested in this one? Yami asked. Kami sighed and said, this child of prophecy is different. He has gone through so much pain and in the end he hasn't received happiness. He sacrificed his life for the Bijus who are immortal brings. As a mortal he is the most unpredictable and has surprised me half of the times. Yami was surprised her sister wasn't the one to get surprised often. Kami then ordered, Shinigami. The Shinigami appeared in front of her. He bowed down to her and asked. What do you need, Kami-sama? Summon Naruto Uzumaki, immediately. Kami ordered the Shinigami, who reasoned. I can't, as you can see he has used the forbidden contract and summoned me to the mortal realm. Kami frowned and said. If you don't comply, I will make sure you will get double the paperwork for reviving someone who used the contract. The Shinigami gulped, then complied. He then reached inside his stomach and pulled out Naruto's soul and body. He added the soul to the body, to which Naruto blinked before waking up and asked. Where am I? Naruto asked, still couldn't open his eyes. Once he did, he saw the Shinigami and asked, Shinigami-sama, why am I not dead? Shinigami sighed and said, Kami-sama wanted to speak with you. Hence your soul is in your body. Naruto then got up and saw 2 women. One wore a white kimono while the other wore a black kimono. Naruto thought for a second, then bowed. It's an honor to meet you, Kami-sama. Yami-sama. Kami was surprised, then asked, how did you know Yami-chan was here? Naruto then stood straight, pointed to the woman in the black kimono and said, you wear the white kimono while Yami-sama wears a black one. White presents light while black represents dark. Hence I knew. Yami smiled, then looked at Kami and said, looks like you were right. He is special to recognize us just by clothes. Naruto got confused and asked, how am I special? I haven't done anything to deserve the title special. Kami smiled at Naruto and said, Naruto-kun, you have escaped death too many times. You have even surprised me as to how you have handled the pain for so long. I can give you a chance to make everything right. Naruto then asked, Naruto-kun. Kami blushed but said, you are too handsome, Naruto. Kami then looked at Yami, who was grinning evilly. She knew that her sister will not pass this easily. Naruto smiled and said, thank you for the compliment, Kami-chan. Kami blushed even more while Yami and Shinigami looked at him in disbelief that he called Kami the goddess of the gods, the deity of goodness. Kami-chan. Nobody except for Yami had the guts to call her that. You are way too good with words, Naruto. Maybe you might be an interesting one after all, Yami thought. Naruto then cleared his throat and asked, what do you mean by make everything right? I will send you back in time after the Great Shinobi War, where everything started, Kami said. Won't everyone question as to where I came from? Naruto asked. Kami shook her head and said, you will have artificial memories implanted in your brain and you will be sent back somewhere random. Naruto nodded and said, I will accept because I want to protect my precious people, no matter what the cost. Kami smiled and said, before you return you will have all the Biju still sealed in you but you won't be able to use the toad summoning. Naruto then thought for a second and asked, will that affect my senjutsu? Kami shook her head and said, it will not since you learned to absorb natural energy. Naruto nodded. Before he could say anything, Kami spoke again. Also you will have a 5-year-old body with a 17-year-old soul. That was Naruto's breaking point. What? Naruto sighed and said, fine. Kami then pointed at Naruto and said person received a rush of memories making his head pain. After a while he heard a familiar voice. Hey kid, Kurama said. Kurama. Naruto exclaimed. Not only him but all of us, Isobu said. I am glad you guys are here, Naruto said. We are glad as well, Naruto. This time it was Son Goku who said. Naruto went back to Kami's realm and spoke. Kami-sama, I have a question. What is it, Naruto? Naruto went serious and asked, what is the food of the gods? Shinigami. The Biju and Yami sweat dropped at the question, to which Kami said. Ramen. Duh. Naruto smiled and said, I knew it. By the grace of the logs. Ban the ramen haters. Kami grinned as well and realized that Naruto is a ramen lover. She then said, can't do that since the majority of the court has to vote and also it will be imbalance in power. But if I chose, then it would happen. Naruto and Kami then started laughing evilly, which will put Madaras and the Shinigamis to shame. After a while they calmed down and Kami said, go, Naruto. The child of prophecy. Save the world and fulfill your dream. With that Naruto vanished from Kami's realm. On an island shore. Arashi-sama. We found someone, a guard said. The person known as Arashi came and saw a blond boy with whisker mask on his face lying on the shore with his body bleeding. He then said. What happened to him? The guard diagnosed him and said. He is suffering from extreme chakra exhaustion and has a punctured lung, few broken ribs and bones and damaged muscles. Arashi's eyes widened and looked at the boy. Looks like the boy just went through hell and back. How is he alive though? Arashi thought. Bring him to the village and treat him immediately, Arashi ordered. Hi. They picked the boy up and shunshin to the village. 5 days later. In a village. UGHHH, where am I? Naruto asked. Kid, you're finally awake. Looks like we are in a hospital, Kurama said. I know that you fuzzball, but which village? Naruto asked. Kurama ignored the nickname and said, no idea, you should probably ask the man who has just arrived in your room. Naruto nodded and focused on his surroundings. So you're finally awake, huh? The man said. The man had white hair and a short beard. He wore a headband with a spiral and navy blue combat robes with the same swirl on it. Naruto looked at him but winced in pain and asked, who are you and where are we? The man replied, shouldn't the person who arrived in our village greet himself first? Naruto nodded at the reason and said, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. The man's eyes widened and asked, how are you an Uzumaki with blonde hair? Naruto answered, my dad had blonde hair while my mom had red. We lived in Mizu no Kuni until shinobi attacked. My parents sacrificed themselves for me when I was born. I never knew them because they died when I was born. My Jiji took care of me since I was born. He trained me in the shinobi arts. After he died, some shinobi broke in his house and beat me till I begged for forgiveness. They then threw me in the ocean. Thank you for saving me. The man saw the pain in Naruto's eyes and flinched when he heard he was beaten. He then spoke, I see. That explains the reason for you being alive. The Uzumaki's healing factor must have helped you live. Naruto nodded. My Jiji did explain the advantages of being an Uzumaki. Will you now answer my questions? The man nodded and answered. My name is Arashi Uzumaki, the leader of Uzushiogakure, and we are in a hospital in Uzushiogakure. Naruto's eyes widened. He realized he can still save his relatives from the Kumo, Kiri and Iwa invasion. He calmed down and asked, could I stay in the village? Arashi thought for a while before saying. You can, Naruto, but where will you stay? Naruto thought and asked, can you give me a small apartment with a monthly stipend? Arashi's eyes widened and asked. You know you could have asked to stay in an orphanage, right? Naruto looked down and said, I wouldn't want to be a burden to others. The people in Mizu no Kuni treated me like I didn't belong and ignored me. My Gigi was the only one that told me to never give up. I wouldn't want to be a burden since you are a relative of mine. Arashi's heart broke at hearing this. To think that people had such hearts to ignore and take away parents of an innocent boy as well. He thought for a while, then asked, why don't I adopt you? Naruto's eyes widened and asked with hope, really? Of course, it is in the Uzumaki blood to never abandon family. I'm sure Kushina-chan wouldn't mind having a little brother. Naruto's eyes widened. The person he was talking to is Kushina's father. His Ka-san's father. His hair then shadowed his eyes and tears dropped from them. Thank you, Arashi-sama. No need to thank me, and cut the Arashi-sama. I am not one for formalities, especially for my soon-being son. With that, Arashi left, leaving Naruto to his thoughts. He remembered his childhood. The reason he was scorned for his entire life. Get out here, demon. Just die already. Yeah, the monster fox would do that, but Naruto is different. I've acknowledged him as one of my excellent students. He may not be the hardest worker, and he is clumsy and no one accepts him, but he already knows what it is to feel pain inside your heart. He isn't the monster fox. He is a member of the Konohagakure. He's Naruto Uzumaki. Iruka-sensei. When the tree leaves dance, one shall find flames. The fire's shadow will illuminate the village, and once again, tree leaves shall bud anew. Gigi. In the ninja world, those who break the rules are trash, that's true, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. Kakashi-sensei. Even I can tell that hatred is spreading. I wanted to do something about it, but I don't know what, but I believe that someday the day will come when people truly understand one another. If I can't find the answer, it will be up to you to do it. Ero Sennin. Goodbye, my one and only friend. Sasuke. I think of you as a friend. I used to think, friend, was just another word, nothing more, nothing less. But when I met you, I realized what was important was the word's meaning. Gaara. It's because, I love you. Hinata. Hey, a father always believes in his child, right? I believe in you, Naruto. To-san. Thank you for letting me be your mother, and for letting Minato be your father. Thank you for being our son. Thank you. Ka-san. After going through his memories, Naruto was openly crying on the hospital bed. He cried himself to sleep after everything he had gone through. The Anbu were watching him and wanted to know what life he had gone through to be so sad. Next day, at Arashi's house. You're bringing him today, To-san? A 6-year-old Kushina asked. Yes, Kushina-chan, remember to be nice. He has had a tough life, Arashi said. I will, To-san, I will protect him with my life. Arashi smiled at the energetic redhead before he shunshined to the hospital to pick up Naruto. At the hospital, Naruto was sleeping peacefully. His tear marks were still on his face. The rays of sunlight woke him up. He turned around to see Arashi. Good morning, Arashi-san, he said as he got up. Good morning, Naruto-kun. It's To-san now for you. Naruto got confused, which made Arashi laugh. You thought I was joking about adopting you. Naruto's eyes widened before he smiled and said, thank you, To-san, for adopting me. Hey, as I said, we never leave an Uzumaki behind. No need to thank me, Naruto nodded before Arashi said. Let's go to meet your new family. Naruto got off the bed and ran to hug him. Arashi smiled, then shunshined. At Arashi's house. You're too excited, Kushina-chan, why don't you calm down, Ashina said. I can't, Ka-san, I am going to have a brother, Kushina said. They heard a knock on the door. Kushina ran and opened the door. She saw her father and a blonde boy behind him. They walked in and Naruto sat on the couch. Kushina stretched out her hand and said, hello, Ni-san, I am Kushina Uzumaki, your Oni-san. What's your name? Naruto was hesitant but shook her hand and said, Naruto Uzumaki, nice to meet you, Oni-san. Ashina walked and said, hello, Naruto-kun, I am Ashina Uzumaki, your Ka-san. Nice to meet you, thanks for adopting me. He bowed and Ashina waved him in dismissal and said, no need to bow to us, Naruto-kun. Your family. Naruto smiled and nodded. Arashi then spoke, Naruto, you said you trained with your Gigi, right? Naruto nodded and said, I learnt chakra control and 2 jutsus. Kushina's eyes widened and asked, "You learnt chakra control already? Which ones?" "I learnt 4 of them. The first was the leaf balancing, second is the tree walking, third is the water walking and the fourth is kunai levitating." Arashi's eyes widened. The tree walking was a normal exercise for Uzumakis but water walking is for Uzumaki genins. The kunai levitating though was an advanced chakra control exercise. It was for Uzumaki Jonins. What kind of life did you go through Naruto-kun to deserve this exercise, he thought. I haven't heard of the kunai levitating chakra control exercise, Kushina said. It's because it is for people with large chakra capacity. I have too much chakra, Naruto said. What were the jutsus though Naruto-kun? Naruto brought out his hands with index and middle finger out then formed a cross-hand sign and called out, "Shadow clone jutsu," and with that he created clones that filled the entire houses. He dispelled them and said, "Sorry guys, I made too much." Arashi, Ashina and Kushina's jaws dropped. The sheer amount of chakra he made those clones could rival 2 Arashis and he wasn't winded at all. They now knew what he meant by too much chakra. What was the second jutsu Ni-san? Kushina asked. Naruto then created a big ball of dense chakra in his palm. 19 Chapter 2. Killers SG Chapter 1. Not a bad chapter. I like the part when him and Kami were laughing maniacally about ramen and such and hope to see more chapters. Will Naruto get with Mikoto as just friends if there is a pairing at all for him? Maybe he shouldn't have shown them the Rasengan since Minato needed to create it still. Reply. Thanks. Naruto will have a pairing with Mikoto and Minato will have an even more OP variant of the Rasengan. I love Bowling 3 Chapter 1. I'm interested in where this goes but what will happen when she meets Minato? Reply. I don't know either, I will think of it along the way. Fairy Magic 239 Chapter 1. Loving this story so far, can't wait for Chapter 2. Reply. Thanks. Rakan Chapter 1. That was a good chapter, nice writing. Reply. Thanks. Shapeshifter 340 Chapter 1. Interesting new story, please continue it as soon as possible along with your other one, thanks. Reply. Yes, I will continue both of them. Thanks. Siddhartha Kumar Balian Chapter 1. It is very good, I cannot wait for next part, please post as soon as possible. Reply. Well, here it is, smile. Glory Frost Chapter 1. Not bad at all. I like this story cause I very much like Naruto X Mikoto. Reply. Thanks. Author's note. I apologize for not posting often. It's just I have school and tests. If you think this fanfic is abandoned. It's not. I don't own Naruto. Masashi Kishimoto-sama owns him. Chapter 2. 2 years later. In Kushina's room. Kushina, it's. Ashina said but was interrupted. No, I'm not going. Kushina replied. The door creaked open, startling them, only to find Naruto rubbing his half-open eyelids in his pajamas. What's going on, Ka-chan, Ne-chan? Naruto asked. Ashina explained what happened. Flashback no jutsu wish. 6 days ago. Uzumaki clan leader's office. Arashi-sama, we have some ninja from Konoha. They need to speak with you privately, and Uzumaki Anbu said. Send them in, Arashi said. A few minutes later the door opened to reveal a spiky silver-haired man with the standard Konoha Jonin uniform and Konoha headband on his forehead. The man walked and bowed. Good day, Arashi-sama. Sakumo, Hiruzen sent you this time, must be important, the man now named Sakumo nodded. The Shodime's wife, Mito Uzumaki, is on the verge of dying and is asking that you personally send your daughter to Konoha as the next host. She will be escorted with 5 ANBUs with me as well. This is a request from Mito, Sakumo finished. Arashi's face was unreadable. He thought for a while then spoke, I will need permission from my daughter. It can be bad for her since she will be an outsider. If she agrees in a week, I will allow this. Since we have a week, I will make some accommodations for you and the 5 Anbu. I understand, Sakumo said then left. Once Sakumo left, Arashi looked down and gave a dangerous glare at the paperwork. I knew you were bad luck, he thought then sighed since it was nothing he could do. In the evening, Arashi finished his cursed paperwork and shunshined back to the house. Once he reached, he opened the door and gave a, I'm home. A second later Ashina came. Welcome, Arashi-kun. How was your day? She asked. Arashi explained what happened. Once the explanation was over, Ashina was still for a minute with a shocked gaze. You can't be serious, Arashi. She will get bullied for being an outsider, Ashina said. That's what I said as well, Arashi started, but it's also a request from Mito-sama. Ashina frowned slightly before getting back to a neutral state. I will have to ask Kushi-chan if she has to, but what about Naru-chan? He will be lonely. Arashi thought before saying, he can go and visit Kushina every year while he can send messages throughout the year. Ashina frowned again. I don't like this Arashi, but it's for Mito-sama. I will ask Kushina tomorrow. For now let's get some sleep. She then stretched and headed to their bedroom. Arashi nodded and walked to the bedroom as well. End flashback. Once Ashina finished, Naruto was no more groggy and was listening intently. Kurama, you heard that right? Naruto asked mentally. Of course I did, looks like I get multiple chains piercing my body, again. Naruto winced at the thought of getting pierced since he was at the end of one but not multiple. He was cut off when someone was shaking him. Naruto, you okay? Ashina asked. Naruto shook his head vigorously before smiling. Of course I am, just thinking if I could go with Ka-chan Sashir I don't be lonely. Ashina looked at him surprised that an idea did not come up in their minds before smiling. That's wonderful. She then turned to Kushina who was surprised that he would come with her instead of helping her stay. Kushina finally nodded and said, I will go Ka-chan. Perfect. Since we made up the plan. I'm going to make lunch now, Ashina said. What? It's lunch already? Kushina giggled before saying. Of course sleepyhead, you slept way too long. Naruto pouted at the nickname making Kushina laugh at the dumb cuteness her brother always seemed to have. The next day, at the Uzumaki clan head's office. ZZZZZZZZZZZ. Smack. Ah, what was that for Nei-chan? Naruto whined. Will you stop sleeping already? Kushina asked. Naruto shook his head then went drowsy and mumbled something about sisters and troublesome while somewhere in Konoha all the Naras started sneezing then smirked. Somebody said the sacred word. Kushina got tired and started to pull Naruto's ears. Ow ow ow, that hurts. Nei-chan. Naruto stared in her purple eyes then gulped as he saw he was going to be killed on the spot if he slept again. While they were having their fight, the adults in the room sweat dropped. After a while Arashi cleared his throat and spoke, as I was saying, I would like you to take my late adopted son, Naruto Uzumaki to Konoha. He is well versed in the shinobi arts and can put in a genin team. Tsukumo's eyes widened, a genin? At the age of 7? Surely you must be joking. Arashi shook his head, I'm not, most people would likely call him, a prodigy. Naruto frowned at that word but Arashi continued, but I think it is hard work that made him this good. Naruto went back to smiling. Tsukumo thought before saying, the decision isn't up to me but Hokage-sama's. If he deems Naruto-san worthy then he will be applied to a genin team. For now he can come with us as a bodyguard for Kushina to prove his skills. If he is as good as you say, I may put in a good word with the Hokage. Arashi nodded, I understand. Dismissed. Naruto smiled seeing he was going to see Konoha again. And not just the new one after the pain invasion but the old one he used to know. He ran to Arashi and whispered something to his ears. Arashi's eyes widened then slammed his head on his desk, simultaneously mumbling, stupid, stupid, stupid. Tsukumo's sweat dropped before calling out. Come on, Naruto and Kushina-san. The duo followed Tsukumo outside the office and towards the entrance of Uzushio. On the road to Konoha. 5 Anbu surrounded Naruto and Kushina while Tsukumo summoned his hounds to track any smell nearby. Naruto felt safe but still kept his guard. Suddenly, a smoke bomb appeared in the middle, look out. Tsukumo shouted. The bomb blasted covering the field with smoke. Naruto sensed and grabbed Kushina and ran to a tree for height. On the tree they saw dour black shadows on the other tree branches. Naruto quickly formed a hand seal and called out. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Suddenly 10 clones appeared near Naruto and started making hand signs simultaneously. Wind style. Wind severing wave. The clones called out and slashed at the intruders. The intruders had been cut and they fell down from the trees, still alive. Tsukumo and the others flopped down with gaping expressions. Not only had Naruto secured Kushina but he had done an A-rank Kinjutsu with ease and had done a B-rank Wind Jutsu cutting the intruders. Tsukumo broke out of his stupor. Well, cannot say I'm not surprised. I think I will ask Hokage-sama of making you into a genin. Naruto nodded. Tsukumo then went to the intruder and removed their masks, revealing I was shinobi, unconscious. He quickly pulled out a scroll and sealed the shinobi in it. Let's move, Tsukumo said, and they all walked faster. At Konoha, Tsukumo was walking through the gates with Naruto and Kushina. The Anbu were hiding in the shadows, alert. They all headed to the Hokage Tower. Once they reached the Hokage Tower, they walked up to the Hokage's office. Tsukumo knocked the door. When they did not hear anything, they opened the door. There, sitting at the desk was none other than the god of shinobi, Hiruzen Sarutobi. Naruto mentally smiled. It's been long, Gigi, he thought. Naruto could never forget Hiruzen. After all, Hiruzen had taken care of him when he got kicked out of the orphanage, then got him an apartment for himself because of his duties, and people would claim he was showing favoritism. Hokage-sama, mission, escorting Kushina was a success, Tsukumo said. Hiruzen glanced at Kushina because of the red hair resemblance, then Naruto. He looked back at Tsukumo with a raised eyebrow. Who is the child beside Kushina? He asked. I would like to speak with you on that, privately, Tsukumo replied. Hiruzen nodded. Dragon, Hiruzen called out. An Anbu with a dragon mask dropped down out of nowhere. Escort Kushina to the Senju compound. He ordered. The Anbu nodded and asked Kushina to follow him. Kushina did as she was told because she was nervous being in a different village and wanted to meet her grandmother as soon as possible. Once the Anbu and Kushina left, Hiruzen signaled his other Anbu out. After they left, he was about to put the privacy seal before Naruto raised a hand. Hiruzen stopped, observing the boy. Naruto walked to the bookshelf in the Hokage's room and pulled someone out from it and quickly knocked the person unconscious. Hiruzen frowned as he saw an Anbu that wasn't his. Instead of an animal mask, it was a curved mask with the kanji for root on the top. Danzo, he thought before he realized what happened. How did you do that? Hiruzen asked Naruto. I just heard his heartbeat. Naruto said, then shrugged. How do you hear someone's heartbeat? I have a very strong sense of hearing that when I channel chakra to my ears I can hear even the slightest of things. You can put the barrier now, Naruto said. Hiruzen nodded and activated his barrier. He then turned his head to Tsukumo, waiting for an explanation. Ahem, Hokage-sama, this is Naruto Uzumaki and was requested from Uzumaki-sama himself to go with Kushina since they are brother and sister. Brother? Hiruzen asked. I was adopted 2 years ago, though I don't like to talk about my past beyond that. Hiruzen looked into Naruto's eyes to see emotions of sadness and sorrow, no pun intended. He couldn't believe the past the boy had gone through before he was adopted. Tsukumo spoke again. I was thinking maybe he could join Konoha's shinobi force as a genin. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow at that. Is he skilled enough? Tsukumo nodded. Indeed, Hokage-sama. He took down 4 Iwa Chunins without our help. He then pulled out the scroll which had the shinobi and threw it at Hiruzen. Hiruzen caught it and opened the scroll to reveal 4 Iwa Chunins. The Hokage's eyes widened. Are you sure? Tsukumo nodded. Yes sir, he also has mastered an A-rank Kinjutsu of the second. Which one? The Shadow Clone Jutsu. Hiruzen's jaw dropped at that. A 7-year-old mastering the Shadow Clone Jutsu was unheard of. Sure, the Uzumakis had large chakra reserves. But the leader with the largest reserves and could barely make 100 before collapsing with minor chakra exhaustion. He broke out of his stupor then spoke. That is quite surprising. He will allowed to be genin once he finishes his exam today. I will ask the academy to conduct his test right after this meeting. Thank you, Hokage-sama, Naruto replied. It was weird calling his Gigi, Hokage-sama, since he wasn't used to giving respect for his caretaker. Hiruzen nodded, then released the privacy seal and dismissed them. Hiruzen then called 2 Anbi-us. One, he gave the scroll containing the shinobi to the torture and interrogation department. Second, he asked the Anbu to inform the academy of Naruto and his genin test taken immediately. Outside the Hokage Tower. Thanks, Tsukumo-san, Naruto said. Tsukumo smiled. No problem. Now the best thing to do is head to the academy. Naruto nodded and ran towards the academy. At the academy, Naruto reached the academy and walked in to see a Chunin waiting for him. Naruto spoke. Hello, my name is Naruto Uzumaki and I am here to take the test. Greetings Naruto, my name is Ikaro Tokido and I will be conducting your genin test. Now, follow me. Ikaro walked towards the training ground with Naruto following behind him. Once they reached, Ikaro started, Alright Naruto, you have to throw the shuriken and kunai I give you, towards the target. Ikaro handed the shuriken and kunai to Naruto, who hit every single target. Not only did he hit it, he went through the target all the way towards the border. Ikaro was stunned at what he saw. I see why Hokage-sama asked me to take his test, he thought. Ikaro then stood forward. I will be sparring with you. If you survive within 5 minutes, you pass. Naruto stepped forward as well. He just stood there with hands in his pocket waiting for the signal. Is that his stance? Ikaro thought before he shrugged it and called out, Hajime. The battle did not last even 10 seconds. Ikaro could already feel the cold metal on his neck. He turned around to find Naruto with the kunai in his hand, which was grazing his neck. Incredible. He forced me to surrender under 10 seconds. He's clearly beyond genin, Ikaro thought. Naruto stepped back seeing his surrender. Alright Naruto, you are clearly very skilled in taijutsu. Let's move on to ninjutsu. First you have to perform the substitution jutsu. Naruto immediately substituted with one of the training logs. Excellent. Now the transformation jutsu. Naruto again did a technique with no signs. He immediately turned into Ikaro. Now, try a clone jutsu. Naruto put his hand into a cross-shaped seal and called out, Shadow Clone Jutsu. 10 Narutos appeared. Ikaro gaped at Naruto thinking, how much chakra does he have? After that Ikaro pulled out a headband from his pocket and gave it to Naruto. Congratulations. You passed and are now a shinobi of Konoha. Thank you, Ikaro-san. With that Naruto shunshin to the Senju compound. At the Senju compound, Kushina had just arrived at the Senju compound and was being escorted to Mito's room. She reached to Mito's room and opened the door to find a woman in her 90s wearing a white gown with flower petals, sitting on her bed. Kushi-chan. You came, Mito said smiling. Mito Obasan. Kushina asked, confirming it was her. Mito chuckled at the name. She was then tackled by a hug from Kushina. Once they broke the hug, Mito spoke again. I heard from the Hokage about a blonde boy with an Uzumaki name. Is it true? Kushina nodded. His name is Naruto Uzumaki and he is my brother. I think he is currently speaking with the Hokage, I think. They then heard a knock before the door opened to find Naruto wearing his headband. Ni-san. Kushina ignored the headband and hugged Naruto. Once they broke, Naruto looked at Mito. I'm assuming you are Mito-sama. A child with such respect. Mito asked surprised. This is my first time meeting you, Mito-sama. Naruto said smiling. Mito nodded in understanding. Hey Ni-san, where did you get the headband? Kushina asked, finally taking note of it. Oh, this. Naruto pointed to his forehead. Kushina nodded. I asked Hokage-sama to promote me to a genin and he gave me a test to see if I'm worthy. Kushina pouted before having determination in her eyes. I will beat you someday, Ni-san. I'm sure you will, Ne-chan. Naruto replied, making Kushina a little bit happy that her brother believed in her. Mito chuckled then spoke, Naruto, me and Kushi-chan need to talk. Could you spare us some privacy? Naruto nodded and left the room as he knew what was going to happen. He then said, I call it the Rasengan, invented by my two-san and taught by my Gigi. That's awesome, Ni-san, will you teach me? Kushina asked. Of course, Oni-san, Naruto said, making Kushina jump in excitement. Alright children, let's have breakfast. With that they went to the dining table to eat. 19 Chapter 2. Killers SG Chapter 1. Not a bad chapter. I like the part when him and Kami were laughing maniacally about ramen and such and hope to see more chapters. Will Naruto get with Mikoto as just friends if there is a pairing at all for him? Maybe he shouldn't have shown them the Rasengan since Minato needed to create it still. Reply. Thanks. Naruto will have a pairing with Mikoto and Minato will have an even more OP variant of the Rasengan. I love Bowling 3 Chapter 1. I'm interested in where this goes, but what will happen when she meets Minato? Reply. I don't know either, I will think of it along the way. Fairy Magic 239 Chapter 1. Loving this story so far, can't wait for Chapter 2. Reply. Thanks. Rakan Chapter 1. That was a good chapter, nice writing. Reply. Thanks. Shapeshifter 340 Chapter 1. Interesting new story, please continue it as soon as possible along with your other one, thanks. Reply. Yes, I will continue both of them. Thanks. Siddhartha Kumar Balian Chapter 1. It is very good, I cannot wait for next part, please post as soon as possible. Reply. Well, here it is smile. Glory Frost Chapter 1. Not bad at all. I like this story cause I very much like Naruto X Mikoto. Reply. Thanks. Author's note. I apologize for not posting often. It's just I have school and tests. If you think this fanfic is abandoned. It's not. I don't own Naruto. Masashi Kishimoto-sama owns him. Chapter 2. 2 years later. In Kushina's room. Kushina, it's. Ashina said but was interrupted. No, I'm not going. Kushina replied. The door creaked open startling them, only to find Naruto rubbing his half-open eyelids in his pajamas. What's going on Ka-chan, Ne-chan? Naruto asked. Ashina explained what happened. Flashback no jutsu wish. 6 days ago. Uzumaki clan leader's office. Arashi-sama, we have some ninja from Konoha. They need to speak with you privately, and Uzumaki Anbu said. Send them in, Arashi said. A few minutes later the door opened to reveal a spiky silver-haired man with the standard Konoha Jonin uniform and Konoha headband on his forehead. The man walked and bowed. Good day, Arashi-sama. Sakumo, Hiruzen sent you this time, must be important, the man now named Sakumo nodded. The Shodime's wife, Mito Uzumaki is on the verge of dying and is asking that you personally send your daughter to Konoha as the next host. She will be escorted with 5 ANBUs with me as well. This is a request from Mito, Sakumo finished. Arashi's face was unreadable. He thought for a while then spoke, I will need permission from my daughter. It can be bad for her since she will be an outsider. If she agrees in a week, I will allow this. Since we have a week, I will make some accommodations for you and the 5 ANBU. I understand, Sakumo said then left. Once Sakumo left, Arashi looked down and gave a dangerous glare at the paperwork. I knew you were bad luck. He thought then sighed since it was nothing he could do. In the evening, Arashi finished his cursed paperwork and shunshined back to the house. Once he reached he opened the door and gave a, I'm home. A second later Ashina came. Welcome, Arashi-kun. How was your day? She asked. Arashi explained what happened. Once the explanation was over, Ashina was still for a minute with a shocked gaze. You can't be serious Arashi. She will get bullied for being an outsider, Ashina said. That's what I said as well, Arashi started, but it's also a request from Mito-sama. Ashina frowned slightly before getting back to a neutral state. I will have to ask Kushi-chan if she has to, but what about Naru-chan? He will be lonely. Arashi thought before saying, he can go and visit Kushina every year while he can send messages throughout the year. Ashina frowned again, I don't like this Arashi, but it's for Mito-sama. I will ask Kushina tomorrow for now let's get some sleep. She then stretched and headed to their bedroom. Arashi nodded and walked to the bedroom as well. End flashback. Once Ashina finished, Naruto was no more groggy and was listening intently. Kurama, you heard that right? Naruto asked mentally. Of course I did, looks like I get multiple chains piercing my body, again. Naruto winced at the thought of getting pierced since he was at the end of one but not multiple. He was cut off when someone was shaking him. Naruto, you okay? Ashina asked. Naruto shook his head vigorously before smiling. Of course I am, just thinking if I could go with Ka-chan Sashir I'd don't be lonely. Ashina looked at him surprised that an idea did not come up in their minds before smiling, that's wonderful. She then turned to Kushina who was surprised that he would come with her instead of helping her stay. Kushina finally nodded and said, I will go Ka-chan. Perfect. Since we made up the plan. I'm going to make lunch now, Ashina said. What? It's lunch already. Kushina giggled before saying. Of course sleepyhead, you slept way too long. Naruto pouted at the nickname making Kushina laugh at the dumb cuteness her brother always seemed to have. The next day, at the Uzumaki clan head's office. ZZZZZZZZZZZ. Smack. Ah, what was that for Ne-chan? Naruto whined. Will you stop sleeping already? Kushina asked. Naruto shook his head then went drowsy and mumbled something about sisters and troublesome while somewhere in Konoha all the Naras started sneezing then smirked. Somebody said the sacred word. Kushina got tired and started to pull Naruto's ears. Ow ow OW. That hurts. Ne-chan. Naruto stared in her purple eyes then gulped as he saw he was going to be killed on the spot if he slept again. While they were having their fight, the adults in the room sweat dropped. After a while Arashi cleared his throat and spoke, As I was saying, I would like you to take my late adopted son, Naruto Uzumaki to Konoha. He is well versed in the shinobi arts and can put in a genin team. Tsukumo's eyes widened. A genin? At the age of 7? Surely you must be joking. Arashi shook his head. I'm not. Most people would likely call him a prodigy. Naruto frowned at that word, but Arashi continued, but I think it is hard work that made him this good. Naruto went back to smiling. Tsukumo thought before saying, the decision isn't up to me but Hokage-sama's. If he deems Naruto-san worthy, then he will be applied to a genin team. For now he can come with us as a bodyguard for Kushina to prove his skills. If he is as good as you say, I may put in a good word with the Hokage. Arashi nodded. I understand. Dismissed. Naruto smiled, seeing he was going to see Konoha again. And not just the new one after the pain invasion but the old one he used to know. He ran to Arashi and whispered something to his ears. Arashi's eyes widened, then slammed his head on his desk, simultaneously mumbling, stupid, stupid, stupid. Tsukumo's sweat dropped before calling out. Come on, Naruto and Kushina-san. The duo followed Tsukumo outside the office and towards the entrance of Uzushio. On the road to Konoha, 5 Anbu surrounded Naruto and Kushina while Tsukumo summoned his hounds to track any smell nearby. Naruto felt safe but still kept his guard. Suddenly, a smoke bomb appeared in the middle. Look out! Tsukumo shouted. The bomb blasted, covering the field with smoke. Naruto sensed and grabbed Kushina and ran to a tree for height. On the tree they saw dour black shadows on the other tree branches. Naruto quickly formed a hand seal and called out, Shadow Clone Jutsu. Suddenly 10 clones appeared near Naruto and started making hand signs simultaneously. Wind style. Wind severing wave. The clones called out and slashed at the intruders. The intruders had been cut and they fell down from the trees, still alive. Tsukumo and the others flopped down with gaping expressions. Not only had Naruto secured Kushina, but he had done an A-rank Kinjutsu with ease and had done a B-rank Wind Jutsu, cutting the intruders. Tsukumo broke out of his stupor. Well, cannot say I'm not surprised. I think I will ask Hokage-sama of making you into a genin. Naruto nodded. Tsukumo then went to the intruder and removed their masks, revealing Iwa Shinobi, unconscious. He quickly pulled out a scroll and sealed the shinobi in it. Let's move, Tsukumo said, and they all walked faster. At Konoha, Tsukumo was walking through the gates with Naruto and Kushina. The Anbu were hiding in the shadows, alert. They all headed to the Hokage Tower. Once they reached the Hokage Tower, they walked up to the Hokage's office. Tsukumo knocked the door. When they did not hear anything, they opened the door. There, sitting at the desk, was none other than the god of shinobi, Hiruzen Sarutobi. Naruto mentally smiled. It's been long, Gigi, he thought. Naruto could never forget Hiruzen. After all, Hiruzen had taken care of him when he got kicked out of the orphanage, then got him an apartment for himself because of his duties, and people would claim he was showing favoritism. Hokage-sama, mission, escorting Kushina was a success, Tsukumo said. Hiruzen glanced at Kushina because of the red hair resemblance, then Naruto. He looked back at Tsukumo with a raised eyebrow. Who is the child beside Kushina? He asked. I would like to speak with you on that, privately, Tsukumo replied. Hiruzen nodded. Dragon, Hiruzen called out. An Anbu with a dragon mask dropped down out of nowhere. Escort Kushina to the Senju compound. He ordered. The Anbu nodded and asked Kushina to follow him. Kushina did as she was told because she was nervous being in a different village and wanted to meet her grandmother as soon as possible. Once the Anbu and Kushina left, Hiruzen signaled his other Anbu out. After they left, he was about to put the privacy seal before Naruto raised a hand. Hiruzen stopped, observing the boy. Naruto walked to the bookshelf in the Hokage's room and pulled someone out from it and quickly knocked the person unconscious. Hiruzen frowned as he saw an ANBU that wasn't his. Instead of an animal mask, it was a curved mask with the kanji for root on the top. Danzo, he thought before he realized what happened. How did you do that? Hiruzen asked Naruto. I just heard his heartbeat. Naruto said, then shrugged. How do you hear someone's heartbeat? I have a very strong sense of hearing that when I channel chakra to my ears I can hear even the slightest of things. You can put the barrier now, Naruto said. Hiruzen nodded and activated his barrier. He then turned his head to Tsukumo, waiting for an explanation. Ahem, Hokage-sama, this is Naruto Uzumaki and was requested from Uzumaki-sama himself to go with Kushina since they are brother and sister. Brother. Hiruzen asked. I was adopted 2 years ago, though I don't like to talk about my past beyond that. Hiruzen looked into Naruto's eyes to see emotions of sadness and sorrow, no pun intended. He couldn't believe the past the boy had gone through before he was adopted. Tsukumo spoke again. I was thinking maybe he could join Konoha's shinobi force as a genin. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow at that. Is he skilled enough? Tsukumo nodded. Indeed, Hokage-sama. He took down 4 Iwa Chunins without our help. He then pulled out the scroll which had the shinobi and threw it at Hiruzen. Hiruzen caught it and opened the scroll to reveal 4 Iwa Chunins. The Hokage's eyes widened. Are you sure? Tsukumo nodded. Yes sir, he also has mastered an A-rank Kenjutsu of the second. Which one? The Shadow Clone Jutsu. Hiruzen's jaw dropped at that. A 7-year-old mastering the Shadow Clone Jutsu was unheard of. Sure, the Uzumakis had large chakra reserves. But the leader with the largest reserves and could barely make 100 before collapsing with minor chakra exhaustion. He broke out of his stupor then spoke. That is quite surprising. He will allowed to be genin once he finishes his exam today. I will ask the academy to conduct his test right after this meeting. Thank you, Hokage-sama, Naruto replied. It was weird calling his Jiji, Hokage-sama, since he wasn't used to giving respect for his caretaker. Hiruzen nodded then released the privacy seal and dismissed them. Hiruzen then called 2 us. 1 he gave the scroll containing the shinobi to the torture and interrogation department. 2nd he asked the Anbu to inform the Academy of Naruto and his genin test taken immediately. Outside the Hokage Tower. Thanks, Tsukumo-san, Naruto said. Tsukumo smiled. No problem. Now the best thing to do is head to the academy. Naruto nodded and ran towards the academy. At the academy, Naruto reached the academy and walked in to see a Chunin waiting for him. Naruto spoke. Hello, my name is Naruto Uzumaki and I am here to take the test. Greetings Naruto, my name is Ikaro Tokido and I will be conducting your genin test. Now, follow me. Ikaro walked towards the training ground with Naruto following behind him. Once they reached, Ikaro started. Alright Naruto, you have to throw the shuriken and kunai I give you, towards the target. Ikaro handed the shuriken and kunai to Naruto, who hit every single target. Not only did he hit it, he went through the target all the way towards the border. Ikaro was stunned at what he saw. I see why Hokage-sama asked me to take his test. He thought. Ikaro then stood forward. I will be sparring with you. If you survive within 5 minutes, you pass. Naruto stepped forward as well. He just stood there with hands in his pocket waiting for the signal. Is that his stance? Ikaro thought before he shrugged it and called out, Hajime. The battle did not last even 10 seconds. Ikaro could already feel the cold metal on his neck. He turned around to find Naruto with the kunai in his hand which was grazing his neck. Incredible. He forced me to surrender under 10 seconds. He's clearly beyond genin, Ikaro thought. Naruto stepped back seeing his surrender. Alright Naruto, you are clearly very skilled in taijutsu. Let's move on to ninjutsu. First you have to perform the substitution jutsu. Naruto immediately substituted with one of the training logs. Excellent. Now the transformation jutsu. Naruto again did a technique with no signs. He immediately turned into Ikaro. Now, try a clone jutsu. Naruto put his hand into a cross-shaped seal and called out, Shadow Clone Jutsu. 10 Narutos appeared. Ikaro gaped at Naruto thinking, how much chakra does he have? After that Ikaro pulled out a headband from his pocket and gave it to Naruto. Congratulations. You passed and are now a shinobi of Konoha. Thank you, Ikaro-san. With that Naruto shunshin to the Senju compound. At the Senju compound, Kushina had just arrived at the Senju compound and was being escorted to Mito's room. She reached to Mito's room and opened the door to find a woman in her 90s wearing a white gown with flower petals, sitting on her bed. Kushi-chan. You came, Mito said smiling. Mito Obasan. Kushina asked confirming it was her. Mito chuckled at the name. She was then tackled by a hug from Kushina. Once they broke the hug, Mito spoke again. I heard from the Hokage about a blonde boy with an Uzumaki name. Is it true? Kushina nodded. His name is Naruto Uzumaki and he is my brother. I think he is currently speaking with the Hokage I think. They then heard a knock before the door opened to find Naruto wearing his headband. "Ni-san." Kushina ignored the headband and hugged Naruto. Once they broke, Naruto looked at Mito. "I'm assuming you are Mito-sama." "My, a child with such respect." Mito asked, surprised. "This is my first time meeting you, Mito-sama," Naruto said, smiling. Mito nodded in understanding. "Hey Ni-san, where did you get the headband?" Kushina asked, finally taking note of it. "Oh, this." Naruto pointed to his forehead. Kushina nodded. "I asked Hokage-sama to promote me to a genin and he gave me a test to see if I'm worthy." Kushina pouted before having determination in her eyes. "I will beat you someday, Ni-san." "I'm sure you will, Ne-chan," Naruto replied, making Kushina a little bit happy that her brother believed in her. Mito chuckled, then spoke. "Naruto, me and Kushi-chan need to talk. Could you spare us some privacy?" Naruto nodded and left the room as he knew what was going to happen. 19 Chapter 3. 6 months later. In Konoha's training ground. The sun was high, casting long shadows across the lush green grass of the training ground. Naruto stood in the middle, sweat trickling down his brow as he practiced his taijutsu forms. His movements were swift, precise, a testament to the intense training he had undergone in the past 6 months. His body had become more toned, his reflexes sharper, and his chakra control more refined. He had taken his role as a protector seriously, especially with the knowledge of what lay ahead. Mito Uzumaki's passing had left a deep impact on him, knowing that Kushina would soon bear the burden of the 9 tails. He vowed to become strong enough to protect her and everyone he held dear, no matter the cost. "Alright, enough of that for today," Naruto mumbled to himself as he wiped the sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand. His mind was restless, his thoughts wandering back to the conversation he overheard between Kushina and Mito just weeks after arriving in Konoha. The weight of the responsibilities placed on Kushina, the burden of becoming the new jinchuriki of the 9 tails, weighed heavily on him. He knew he had to be strong, not just for himself but for her as well. "Hey, Naruto," a familiar voice called out. Naruto turned to see Tsukumo Hatake, walking towards him with a small smile. Behind him were 3 young shinobi around Naruto's age, Kushina, Mikoto Uchiha, and a young boy with silver hair, Obito Uchiha. The 4 of them had been training together under Tsukumo's guidance for months, each growing stronger with every session. Their bond had deepened, creating a tight-knit group that worked together seamlessly. "Tsukumo-sensei, you're late again," Naruto teased, but the grin on his face showed there was no malice behind the words. "Had to help Kakashi with his training," Tsukumo replied, ruffling Naruto's hair as he reached him. "Besides, you seem to have been keeping yourself busy." Kushina ran up to Naruto, her face flushed with excitement. "Ni-san, guess what? Mito Obasan said I'm getting closer to fully mastering my chains." Her eyes sparkled with determination, the thought of finally mastering the Uzumaki clan's legendary chakra chains giving her an extra boost of confidence. The idea of becoming strong enough to control the 9 tails gave her a sense of purpose, though the thought of what lay ahead still frightened her. Naruto smiled at his sister's enthusiasm. "That's great, Ne-chan. You're going to be stronger than ever. Don't think I'm going to let you get ahead of me." Mikoto chimed in with a smirk, her Sharingan briefly flickering in her eyes as she teased Naruto. Despite her playful demeanor, Naruto knew she was serious about keeping up with him and Kushina. They had formed a close bond during their training, pushing each other to their limits and beyond. "Alright, team," Tsukumo clapped his hands, drawing their attention. "Today, we're going to work on your teamwork and strategy. I've set up a series of traps and obstacles around the training ground. Your goal is to reach the center without triggering any of them. Remember, communication and cooperation are key." Obito groaned, his shoulders slumping. "Traps again. Can't we just spar like usual?" Tsukumo chuckled, patting Obito on the back. "You'll need to sharpen your mind as much as your kunai, Obito. Besides, this exercise will help you think on your feet during a mission." Naruto's gaze flicked to the forested area where the traps were hidden. He took a deep breath, centering himself. "Let's do this," he said, determination hardening his voice. The group moved into formation, with Naruto taking the lead, Kushina and Mikoto flanking him, and Obito covering the rear. As they ventured into the forest, the atmosphere grew tense, each step taken with caution. They knew that one wrong move could set off a chain reaction of traps, and though this was just a training exercise, it felt much more intense. The trees around them loomed tall, their leaves rustling gently in the wind. The light filtering through the canopy created dappled patterns on the ground, making it difficult to spot any potential hazards. Naruto's senses were on high alert, his ears tuned to the slightest sound, his eyes scanning every shadow. Suddenly, a kunai shot out from the shadows, heading straight for Naruto. His reflexes kicked in, and he sidestepped just in time, grabbing the kunai out of the air. "Watch out for the traps," he called out, his eyes continuing to scan the area for any sign of movement. Kushina's chains shot out from her back, latching onto a nearby tree and pulling her into the air just as a hidden pitfall opened beneath her. She swung gracefully to the other side, landing on her feet with a triumphant grin. "Too slow, old man," she shouted back at Tsukumo, who was observing from a distance. Mikoto activated her Sharingan, her eyes glowing red as she detected the chakra signatures of the traps surrounding them. "There are tripwires up ahead. Naruto, can you use your clones to trigger them without getting caught?" On it, Naruto formed a cross-shaped hand sign, and several shadow clones appeared in a puff of smoke. They dashed forward, purposefully stepping on the tripwires, causing a flurry of kunai and shuriken to fly harmlessly overhead. Obito watched in awe as the clones expertly navigated the traps, deflecting projectiles with their own kunai. "Man, Naruto, you make it look so easy," he muttered under his breath. "Keep moving, Obito," Mikoto called out, her tone sharp but not unkind. As they pressed deeper into the forest, the traps grew more complex. Naruto's senses were on high alert, his mind racing to anticipate the next move. He could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of their mission pressing down on him. This was more than just a training exercise, it was a test of their resolve, their ability to work together as a team. A sudden rustling in the bushes to their left made Naruto pause. He held up a hand to signal the group to stop. "There's something off," he whispered, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the area. Kushina nodded, her chains retracting slightly as she prepared to defend. Mikoto's Sharingan was still active, but she shook her head. "I can't see anything unusual, yet." Obito, usually the most relaxed of the group, was tense, his hand hovering over his kunai pouch. "What do you think it is?" Before Naruto could respond, a barrage of shuriken shot out from multiple directions. The group scattered, each of them narrowly avoiding the deadly projectiles. Naruto's clones jumped in to deflect some of the shuriken, but the attack was relentless. "Ambush!" Naruto shouted as he deflected another wave of shuriken. His mind raced, trying to figure out who or what could be behind the sudden attack. Was it part of the training? Or something more sinister? Kushina's chains lashed out, grabbing one of the attackers who had revealed themselves, a masked shinobi clad in dark clothing. She yanked him towards her, her expression fierce. "Who sent you?" she demanded, but the attacker remained silent, struggling against her chains. Mikoto moved swiftly, her Sharingan allowing her to anticipate the moves of another masked shinobi who had appeared. She blocked his strikes with ease, countering with precise blows that left her opponent staggered. Obito, who had initially hesitated, now joined the fray, supporting Mikoto by taking down another attacker with a well-placed kunai throw. His usual playful demeanor was gone, replaced by a serious focus that surprised even him. Naruto, meanwhile, faced off against two attackers who had managed to bypass his clones. He ducked under their synchronized attacks, his movements fluid and calculated. With a swift combination of kicks and punches, he incapacitated one of them, sending the shinobi crashing to the ground. The second attacker came at him with a katana, slashing through the air with deadly precision. Naruto dodged, but the blade nicked his shoulder, drawing a thin line of blood. Ignoring the pain, Naruto countered with a powerful Rasengan, sending the attacker flying into a tree where he slumped unconscious. As the last of the attackers fell, the group regrouped, their breaths heavy from the unexpected battle. "Who were they?" Mikoto asked, her eyes scanning the area for any more threats. Tsukumo appeared from the shadows, his expression grim. "These weren't part of the training. They were real enemies. I didn't expect them to strike here, in the heart of Konoha." Naruto clenched his fists, the realization hitting him hard. They were after us, or maybe just one of us. Kushina's face paled slightly, her mind racing. Could they have been sent by someone who knows about me? About the Nine Tails? Tsukumo shook his head. "It's possible, but we can't be sure. We need to report this to the Hokage immediately." As they made their way back to the village, Naruto's thoughts churned. This attack was a stark reminder that they were no longer just children playing at being shinobi. They were targets, each of them holding something of value that others would kill to obtain. In the Hokage's office, Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, listened intently as Tsukumo and the group relayed the details of the ambush. His expression was thoughtful, his eyes narrowed as he considered the implications. "This is troubling," Hiruzen finally said, his voice grave. For someone to attack within the village boundaries means they were either very bold or very desperate. We'll need to increase security, especially around the Senju compound and the Uzumaki children. Naruto and Kushina exchanged glances. The weight of their situation was becoming more apparent with each passing day. They had come to Konoha to find safety, but now it seemed that danger followed them even here. "We'll need to be more vigilant," Tsukumo said. "I'll continue training them, but perhaps it's time to start thinking about more advanced techniques, especially for Naruto and Kushina." Hiruzen nodded. "I agree. They've shown remarkable skill, but they'll need every advantage we can give them. I'll have Jiraiya return to the village to help with their training. He's been away for too long, and his knowledge will be invaluable." Naruto perked up at the mention of Jiraiya, remembering the bond they had shared in his previous life. "Jiraiya-sensei?" he asked, his voice tinged with hope. Hiruzen smiled slightly, noting the eagerness in Naruto's voice. "Yes, Naruto. Jiraiya will be able to teach you things that even I cannot. He's one of the legendary Sannin, after all." Kushina's eyes sparkled with interest. "Do you think he can teach us some awesome jutsu?" Hiruzen chuckled. "I'm sure he'll have plenty to teach you, Kushina. But remember, with power comes responsibility. You'll need to stay focused and disciplined." Naruto nodded, determination hardening his features. "We won't let you down, Hokage-sama." As they left the Hokage's office, Naruto couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. Jiraiya's return meant more than just training, it was a connection to his past, a link to the man who had mentored him, believed in him, and ultimately died for him. In the Senju compound. Later that evening, Naruto and Kushina sat in the garden of the Senju compound, the cool night air soothing after the day's events. The stars twinkled above them, a reminder that even in the darkness, there was light to guide them. "Ni-san," Kushina began, her voice soft, "do you think we'll be ready? When the time comes, I mean." Naruto looked at her, his heart heavy with the responsibility he felt for her well-being. "We have to be, Nei-chan. We don't have a choice." Kushina leaned against his shoulder, drawing comfort from his presence. "It's just, sometimes I feel like it's too much. Being a jinchuriki, training every day, worrying about enemies we can't see, it's overwhelming." Naruto placed a reassuring hand on her head, ruffling her hair slightly. "I know it's hard, but you're not alone. We're in this together. And I promise, I won't let anything happen to you." Kushina smiled up at him, her worries momentarily eased by his words. "Thanks, Ni-san. I don't know what I'd do without you." Naruto's gaze turned back to the stars, his mind wandering to thoughts of the future. He knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he also knew that as long as they stuck together, they could overcome anything. In the shadows, unbeknownst to them, a pair of eyes watched from the darkness, hidden in the trees outside the Senju compound. The figure observed the two Uzumaki siblings, their gaze lingering on Naruto with an intensity that was almost palpable. "So, the boy has returned," the figure whispered, a twisted smile forming on their lips. "Let's see if he's truly worthy of the name Uzumaki." The figure's mind raced with possibilities, their thoughts dark and malevolent. The Uzumaki name carried power, a power that many desired but few could wield. Naruto, with his blend of strength, intelligence, and determination, was a wildcard, a variable that could tip the balance of power in unexpected ways. The figure vanished into the night, leaving behind only the rustling of leaves as a reminder of their presence. But their plans were already in motion, a web of intrigue and danger that would soon ensnare Naruto and his friends. The next day, at the training ground, the morning sun bathed the training ground in a warm golden light, but the atmosphere was anything but relaxed. Naruto, Kushina, Mikoto, and Obito stood at the ready, their faces set with determination as they awaited their next set of instructions from Tsukumo. "Today," Tsukumo began, his voice carrying a note of seriousness that wasn't usually present, "we're going to focus on something different. You've all proven your skills in combat and strategy, but now it's time to test your resolve. You'll each face a challenge tailored specifically to your strengths and weaknesses." Naruto exchanged a glance with Kushina, who nodded subtly. They knew that this was going to be more than just another training exercise. It was a test to see how far they were willing to go to protect what they held dear. Tsukumo first turned to Obito, who shifted nervously under his gaze. Obito, your challenge will be to confront your fears. You have great potential, but you often hesitate when it matters most. Today, you'll be facing something that will force you to act without hesitation. Obito swallowed hard, but nodded. I'll do my best, sensei. Tsukumo then turned to Mikoto. Mikoto, your challenge will be to rely on your instincts rather than your Sharingan. You've come to depend on your bloodline too much. Today, you'll need to navigate through a situation where your Sharingan won't help you. Mikoto's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded in understanding. I'm ready. Finally, Tsukumo's gaze settled on Naruto and Kushina. Naruto, Kushina, your challenge will be the most difficult. You'll face an opponent stronger than anyone you've encountered so far. You'll need to work together, trust in each other's strengths, and protect each other no matter what. Naruto's eyes narrowed with determination. We won't fail, sensei. Kushina nodded, her expression mirroring Naruto's resolve. We'll show you what we can do. Tsukumo led them to a clearing deeper in the forest, where a series of barriers had been set up. These barriers are designed to isolate each of you from the others. You'll face your challenges alone. When you're ready, step into your barrier, and your challenge will begin. One by one, they stepped into their respective barriers, the shimmering walls of chakra cutting them off from each other. Naruto took a deep breath as he entered his barrier, his senses sharpening in anticipation of what was to come. Naruto's challenge. Inside the barrier, Naruto found himself standing in a vast, empty field. The sky was overcast, the air thick with the scent of rain. He knew that this was no ordinary training ground, it was a manifestation of his own mind, a place where his deepest fears and insecurities would be brought to life. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled, and a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man clad in dark armor, his face hidden behind a fearsome mask. The figure radiated an aura of power and malice, a presence that made Naruto's heart race with fear. Who are you? Naruto demanded, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. The figure didn't respond, but instead raised a hand, summoning a massive storm of chakra that swirled around him like a hurricane. The force of the chakra was overwhelming, pressing down on Naruto with an intensity that made it difficult to breathe. Naruto gritted his teeth, drawing on all his strength to stand his ground. He could feel the weight of the challenge pressing down on him, but he refused to back down. He knew that this was a test to see if he could overcome his own fear and doubt. With a roar of determination, Naruto charged forward, his hands forming the familiar seals for the Rasengan. The chakra sphere formed in his hand, glowing with a bright, intense light as he aimed it at the figure. But just as he was about to strike, the figure vanished, leaving Naruto striking at empty air. The sudden disappearance threw him off balance, and he stumbled forward, the momentum of his attack carrying him past where the figure had stood. Where did you go? Naruto shouted, his eyes darting around the empty field. A voice echoed around him, cold and mocking. You cannot defeat me, Naruto Uzumaki. I am your fear, your doubt, your insecurities. I am the darkness within you. Naruto's heart pounded in his chest, the words striking a chord deep within him. He knew that the figure wasn't real, but the fear it represented was very much so. He had always struggled with doubt, with the fear that he wasn't strong enough, that he would fail those he cared about. But he couldn't afford to let that fear control him. He had too much at stake, his sister, his friends, his village. He had to be strong, not just for himself, but for all of them. Taking a deep breath, Naruto focused his chakra, letting it flow through him like a river of energy. He closed his eyes, centering himself, and when he opened them again, his gaze was steely and resolved. You're right, he said, his voice steady. I do have fears. I do have doubts. But they won't stop me. I won't let them. The figure reappeared before him, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. We'll see about that. Naruto's hands moved quickly, forming the seals for a new jutsu he had been working on, a combination of his Rasengan and wind chakra. The wind-enhanced Rasengan formed in his hand, its energy swirling with a fierce intensity. With a shout, Naruto charged at the figure once more, his determination fueling his every step. This time, the figure didn't vanish. It stood its ground, its own chakra swirling in response. The two forces clashed in a burst of light and energy, the impact sending shockwaves through the field. Naruto could feel the strain on his body, the sheer force of the clash pushing him to his limits. But he refused to back down. Not this time. Naruto roared, pushing his Rasengan forward with all his strength. The figure's chakra shattered under the force of the attack, and with a final, agonized scream, it dissolved into nothingness. The storm of chakra around them dissipated, leaving the field calm and silent once more. Naruto stood there, breathing heavily, the adrenaline slowly fading from his system. He had done it. He had faced his fears, and he had won. As the barrier around him began to dissolve, he could hear the voice of the figure, faint but still present. You may have won this battle, Naruto Uzumaki, but the war within you is far from over. Naruto clenched his fists, a steely resolve in his eyes. Then I'll keep fighting, no matter what. Kushina's challenge. Meanwhile, inside her own barrier, Kushina found herself standing in a dense forest. The trees around her were tall and foreboding, their branches intertwining above her head to create a canopy that blocked out most of the light. The air was thick with the scent of earth and leaves, and the only sound was the soft rustling of the wind through the trees. Kushina felt a sense of unease settle over her as she took in her surroundings. She knew this forest, it was the same one she had been brought to after becoming the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. The memories of that time were still fresh in her mind, a mix of pain and fear that she had tried to bury deep within her. As she moved deeper into the forest, she felt the presence of the Nine Tails stirring within her. Its chakra pulsed through her body, a dark, ominous energy that sent shivers down her spine. Kushina, the voice of the Nine Tails echoed in her mind, deep and rumbling. You're afraid, aren't you? Afraid of me. Afraid of what I can do. Kushina clenched her fists, trying to steady her breathing. I'm not afraid of you, Kurama. I'm afraid of losing control. I'm afraid of hurting the people I care about. Kurama chuckled, a low, sinister sound that made her blood run cold. You should be afraid. You're just a child, trying to control a power that you can't even begin to understand. It's only a matter of time before you lose control. Kushina's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of Kurama's words pressing down on her. She had always feared this, feared that she would lose control, that she would become a monster. The thought of hurting Naruto, or anyone else she cared about, was unbearable. But as she stood there, surrounded by the darkness of the forest, she realized something. She wasn't alone. She had her family, her friends, and most importantly, she had Naruto. They had been through so much together, and she knew that no matter what happened, they would always have each other's backs. Taking a deep breath, Kushina reached out to Kurama with her mind, focusing on the connection they shared. I won't let you control me, Kurama. You're a part of me, but you don't define me. I'm stronger than you think. Kurama's chuckle faded, replaced by a thoughtful silence. You're an interesting one, Kushina. Perhaps there's more to you than I thought. With that, the oppressive feeling of Kurama's chakra began to recede, leaving Kushina feeling lighter, more in control. She knew that this was just the beginning, that she would have to continue to work to control the Nine Tails' power. But for the first time, she felt like she could do it. As the barrier around her dissolved, she heard Kurama's voice one last time. We'll see how strong you really are, Kushina Uzumaki. Don't disappoint me. Kushina smiled faintly, a new determination burning in her chest. I won't. Mikoto's challenge. In her own barrier, Mikoto found herself in the middle of a labyrinthine maze. The walls were high and made of smooth, unyielding stone, and the path ahead was winding and uncertain. The air was cool, almost unnervingly so, and the silence was only broken by the occasional drip of water echoing through the tunnels. Mikoto took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew what this challenge was about. She had come to rely too much on her Sharingan. It had become her crutch, something she depended on to guide her through every battle and every situation. But today, she would have to navigate this maze without it. Closing her eyes, she deactivated her Sharingan, feeling a strange sense of vulnerability wash over her as the familiar red glow faded from her vision. For the first time in a long while, she was relying solely on her instincts. She began to walk, her footsteps echoing off the stone walls as she made her way through the maze. The path twisted and turned, and there were moments when she felt completely lost, but she forced herself to keep going. As she walked, she couldn't help but think about the lessons her father had taught her. He had always emphasized the importance of the Uchiha bloodline, of the Sharingan, as the source of their strength. But today, she was beginning to realize that true strength came from within, from the ability to trust herself, even when her bloodline abilities were stripped away. The maze seemed endless, each turn leading to another identical path. But Mikoto kept her focus, letting her instincts guide her. She could feel a growing sense of confidence, a quiet assurance that she was on the right path. Finally, after what felt like hours, she reached the center of the maze. The walls fell away, revealing a small, serene garden bathed in soft, golden light. In the middle of the garden stood a stone pedestal, upon which rested a single, glowing crystal. Mikoto approached the pedestal, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that this crystal was the key to completing her challenge. But as she reached out to touch it, she hesitated. What if this is a trap? She thought, doubt creeping into her mind. But then she pushed the thought aside. She had to trust herself, to trust that she had made the right decisions to get here. With a steady hand, she grasped the crystal, feeling its warmth spread through her body. The garden around her began to dissolve, the walls of the maze falling away to reveal the familiar training ground. Mikoto opened her eyes, reactivating her Sharingan. But this time, she felt different. She felt stronger, more in control. She knew that she had proven something to herself today, that she was more than just her bloodline. As she stepped out of the barrier, she saw Naruto and Kushina waiting for her, both of them looking just as exhausted as she felt. But there was a sense of camaraderie in the air, a silent understanding that they had all faced something difficult today and come out stronger for it. Obito's challenge. Meanwhile, inside his own barrier, Obito found himself standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind howling around him as it whipped through his hair. The sky was dark and stormy, the clouds roiling with a sense of impending doom. Obito's heart raced as he looked down at the chasm below, his stomach twisting with fear. He had always been afraid of heights, a fear that had plagued him since he was a child. And now, it seemed, his challenge was to confront that fear head-on. Great, Obito muttered to himself, his voice shaky. Of all the things they could have thrown at me, it had to be heights. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He knew that he had to jump, that was the only way to complete his challenge. But every instinct in his body was screaming at him not to do it, to stay safe on solid ground. But he couldn't stay here forever. He had to prove to himself that he could do this, that he could overcome his fear and be the shinobi he wanted to be. Taking another deep breath, Obito took a step forward, then another. The edge of the cliff loomed closer, and he could feel his heart pounding in his chest, his palms slick with sweat. Come on, Obito, he muttered to himself. You can do this. Just one step. With a final burst of courage, Obito launched himself off the edge of the cliff, his eyes squeezing shut as he plummeted towards the chasm below. The wind roared in his ears, the sensation of falling making his stomach lurch, but he forced himself to stay calm. Just as he thought he couldn't take it anymore, the wind around him shifted, and he felt a sudden, powerful force lifting him up, slowing his descent. He opened his eyes, and to his amazement, he saw that he was no longer falling, he was floating, suspended in the air by a cushion of chakra. A sense of exhilaration washed over him, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he was in control, like he could conquer his fear. He allowed himself to drift down to the ground, landing softly on his feet at the bottom of the chasm. As the barrier around him dissolved, Obito felt a newfound sense of confidence. He had faced his fear, and he had come out on top. He knew that this was just the beginning, that there would be more challenges ahead, more fears to confront. But now, he knew that he could handle them. He rejoined the others, his chest swelling with pride as he saw the looks of respect on their faces. They had all faced their own challenges, and now they were stronger for it. 19 Chapter 4, I Don't Own Naruto. Masashi Kishimoto-sama owns him. Chapter 4, A New Beginning. At the Senju compound. The following morning, the Senju compound was alive with renewed energy. Naruto, Kushina, Mikoto, and Obito had all faced their personal challenges and emerged stronger, their bond deepened by the trials they had overcome. But the weight of their responsibilities was ever present, a reminder that their journey was only just beginning. Naruto woke early, the first rays of dawn filtering through the shoji screens of his room. The events of the previous day played on his mind, a mixture of pride in his progress and the sobering realization of what lay ahead. As he dressed, the memories of his previous life, of the horrors he had witnessed, of Madara's merciless destruction, flooded his mind. He had returned to this time with a purpose that no one else knew, and every day, that purpose drove him to push harder, to become stronger. He couldn't let history repeat itself. The nightmares that haunted his sleep were vivid reminders of the destruction that awaited if he failed. Uzushiogakure, the hidden village of the Uzumaki clan, was supposed to fall. But this time, Naruto would not allow it. He had all the tailed beasts within him, an unfathomable power that he would use to protect the village and, more importantly, his family. As he exited his room, he found Kushina waiting for him in the hallway, her red hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. She offered him a small smile, though there was a hint of tension in her eyes. "Morning, Ni-san." "Morning, Ne-chan," Naruto replied, giving her a reassuring nod. "Ready for another day?" Kushina sighed, leaning against the wall. "I guess so. Yesterday was intense. But I'm glad we all made it through." "Yeah," Naruto agreed, his thoughts drifting to the challenges they had faced. But he couldn't shake the feeling of urgency that clung to him, a sense that time was running out, even in this earlier world. He had to protect Kushina, and by extension, their clan. "But we can't get too comfortable. There's still a lot we need to do." Kushina nodded, her expression growing more serious. "I know. But we've got each other, right? As long as we stick together, we can handle anything." Naruto smiled at her optimism, feeling a surge of warmth at the bond they shared. But beneath that warmth was a steely resolve, born from the pain of loss and the need to prevent the tragedies he knew were coming. "Right. Together." As they made their way to the kitchen, they found Mikoto and Obito already there, seated at the low wooden table. Mikoto was sipping tea, her eyes closed in quiet contemplation, while Obito was halfway through a bowl of rice, his usual carefree grin in place. "Morning, sleepyheads," Obito teased as they entered. "You two miss out on the sunrise training session." Naruto rolled his eyes but couldn't help the grin that tugged at his lips. "We'll catch up, don't worry." Mikoto opened her eyes, glancing at them both. "Tsukumo-sensei mentioned something about Jiraiya-sama returning to the village. Do you think he'll train us?" Kushina's eyes lit up at the prospect. "Jiraiya-sama is one of the legendary Sannin, right? If he trains us, we'll be unstoppable." Naruto felt a mix of excitement and anticipation at the thought of Jiraiya's return. He had so much he wanted to learn, so many techniques he needed to master, especially if he was to prevent the future he came from. But there was also the knowledge that Jiraiya represented a connection to the future that had been lost, a reminder of the devastation that awaited if he failed. "I'm sure he'll have plenty to teach us," Naruto said, keeping his thoughts focused on the present. "But we need to be ready for whatever he throws at us." Obito nodded, his usual playful demeanor taking on a more serious tone. "Yeah, I'm ready to show him what I've got." As they ate their breakfast, the conversation turned to their upcoming training, each of them speculating on what challenges Jiraiya might present. But beneath the excitement, there was an undercurrent of tension, a shared understanding that the stakes were higher than ever. Naruto, in particular, felt the weight of his hidden knowledge pressing down on him, urging him to prepare for the battles he knew were coming. Later that day, in the Hokage's office, Jiraiya stood before the third Hokage, his arms crossed as he listened to the details of the situation. Hiruzen's expression was grave, his fingers steepled as he spoke. "The attack during the training session was no coincidence," Hiruzen said, his voice carrying the weight of the situation. "Someone knows about Kushina's role as the next jinchuriki, and they're trying to strike before she's fully prepared." Jiraiya's brow furrowed, a rare look of concern crossing his usually carefree features. "And you're sure it's not just a random attack?" Hiruzen shook his head. "No. The timing, the precision, it was planned. They knew exactly where to strike. We've tightened security, but I'm afraid this is just the beginning." Jiraiya sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I knew the situation was bad, but I didn't expect it to escalate so quickly. I'll do everything I can to get those kids ready." Hiruzen nodded, his eyes meeting Jiraiya's with a solemn intensity. "I trust you, Jiraiya. They're strong, but they're still young. They need guidance, and you're the best person to provide it." Jiraiya's expression softened slightly, a hint of pride in his mentor's words. "I won't let you down, sensei. I'll make sure they're ready for whatever comes their way." With that, Jiraiya turned and left the office, his mind already racing with thoughts of how to approach the training. He knew that Naruto, Kushina, Mikoto, and Obito were talented, but talent alone wouldn't be enough. They needed to be prepared for the harsh realities of the world they were stepping into. And though he didn't know it, one of those realities was the presence of a time traveler among them, Naruto, carrying the weight of a world destroyed by war. As he made his way to the Senju compound, Jiraiya couldn't help but feel a deep sense of responsibility. The next generation of shinobi had so much potential, but they also faced incredible dangers. His role was to guide them, to help them unlock their full power and prepare them for the challenges that lay ahead. I'll train them to the best of my ability, Jiraiya thought to himself as he approached the compound. They're going to need all the strength they can get for what's coming. At the Senju compound, Naruto, Kushina, Mikoto, and Obito were gathered in the courtyard, sparring under Tsukumo's watchful eye. The clang of kunai against kunai and the rush of wind from their jutsu filled the air, each of them pushing themselves to their limits. But Naruto's thoughts were elsewhere, his mind divided between the present training and the grim future he was determined to change. When Jiraiya entered the courtyard, his towering presence and the weight of his reputation immediately drew their attention. Tsukumo stepped back, allowing Jiraiya to take center stage. "All right, you four," Jiraiya called out, his voice commanding but laced with a hint of mischief. "Let's see what you've got." Naruto and the others exchanged glances, a mixture of excitement and nervousness bubbling up inside them. They knew who Jiraiya was, one of the legendary Sannin, a man whose name was spoken with both awe and respect throughout the shinobi world. But for Naruto, Jiraiya's arrival meant more than just training. It meant another chance to prepare for the war that had once consumed his life. It meant another step toward preventing the devastation that had claimed everything he held dear. Naruto stepped forward first, his blue eyes filled with determination. "We're ready, Jiraiya-sama." Jiraiya grinned, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Good. Because I'm not going to go easy on you. If you want to be strong, you're going to have to earn it." Kushina, Mikoto, and Obito moved into position beside Naruto, their expressions mirroring his resolve. They knew this was their chance to prove themselves, to show that they were worthy of the training Jiraiya could offer. "First things first," Jiraiya said, his tone suddenly serious. "We're going to start with the basics. Show me your chakra control." Naruto exchanged a glance with Kushina, both of them silently acknowledging that chakra control had always been one of their strong suits. But as they began to channel their chakra, focusing it into their hands, they quickly realized that Jiraiya wasn't interested in just the usual exercises. "Balance that chakra while standing on water," Jiraiya instructed, leading them to a small pond in the courtyard. "And keep it steady. I don't want to see a single ripple." Naruto stepped onto the water's surface, feeling the familiar pull of gravity as he adjusted his chakra flow to maintain his balance. But this time, the exercise felt different. Every ripple in the water, every slight disturbance, reminded him of the fragility of the world he had once known. He could feel the tension in the water beneath his feet, every small shift in his chakra control causing the surface to react. Kushina followed, her own chakra control precise and steady. She had always been good at this, but the challenge of keeping the water completely still was more difficult than she anticipated. Mikoto and Obito joined them, each of them focusing intently on their task. Mikoto's chakra control was flawless, a result of her Uchiha lineage and years of training. Obito, though less confident, managed to maintain his balance, his determination pushing him forward. Jiraiya watched them closely, his keen eyes taking in every detail. "Not bad," he said after a few minutes. "But you're still too focused on the surface. Try to control your chakra at a deeper level, think of it as controlling the flow of a river, not just the surface of a pond." Naruto furrowed his brow, concentrating on the deeper currents of chakra within him. He adjusted his flow, trying to maintain the balance between the surface and the deeper layers. It was more challenging than he had anticipated, but he could feel the improvement as he pushed himself further. Kushina seemed to take to the new instruction with ease, her chakra flowing smoothly beneath the surface. Mikoto and Obito struggled a bit more, but they were determined to meet the challenge head-on. After a while, Jiraiya nodded, satisfied with their progress. "All right, that's enough for now. You've got a good handle on chakra control, but we'll need to work on refining it even further. Especially you, Naruto." Naruto blinked in surprise. "Me? What do I need to work on?" Jiraiya chuckled, a knowing smile on his lips. "You've got a lot of chakra, kid. More than most shinobi. But that means you need to be even more careful with how you control it. Raw power is great, but without precision, it's just wasted energy." Naruto nodded, understanding the point Jiraiya was making. He had always relied on his large chakra reserves, but he knew that he needed to learn how to use that power more effectively. Next, Jiraiya continued, we're going to work on something a bit more advanced. I want to see how well you can handle combat under pressure. He motioned for them to follow him to the edge of the courtyard, where several wooden dummies had been set up. Each one was equipped with various traps and mechanisms designed to test their reflexes and combat skills. You'll be facing these dummies in pairs, Jiraiya explained. Naruto, you'll be with Kushina. Mikoto, you'll pair up with Obito. The goal is to take down the dummies as quickly and efficiently as possible without triggering any of the traps. Naruto and Kushina exchanged a glance, both of them eager to prove themselves. Mikoto and Obito moved into position as well, their eyes focused on the task ahead. Ready? Jiraiya asked, his voice taking on a more commanding tone. Begin. Naruto and Kushina moved in sync, their movements fluid as they closed in on their target. Naruto's instinct screamed for him to use the Rasengan, but he quickly dismissed the thought, remembering that the jutsu was still unknown in this time. Instead, he relied on taijutsu and his sharp reflexes, deflecting the traps with a well-placed kunai while Kushina's chakra chains lashed out, ensnaring the dummy and pulling it towards them. As they struck, the dummy's trap mechanisms activated, sending a barrage of shuriken flying towards them. Naruto deflected the shuriken with his kunai, while Kushina used her chains to shield them from the attack. They continued their assault, working together seamlessly to take down the dummy. Naruto's movements were precise, and Kushina's chains kept the dummy immobilized, preventing it from triggering any more traps. Mikoto and Obito were also locked in combat with their dummy, each of them using their unique skills to outmaneuver the traps. Mikoto's Sharingan allowed her to anticipate the dummy's movements, while Obito's quick reflexes helped him avoid the traps. As the dummies finally fell, Jiraiya clapped his hands, a grin on his face. Not bad at all. You've got potential, all of you. But remember, this was just the beginning. The real challenges are still ahead. Naruto, Kushina, Mikoto, and Obito stood before Jiraiya, their breaths heavy but their spirits high. They had proven themselves, but they knew that there was still much more to learn. Jiraiya's expression grew more serious as he addressed them. You've all shown great promise today. But the path you're on is dangerous, and there are no guarantees. You'll need to be stronger, smarter, and more resilient than ever before. Are you ready for that? Naruto stepped forward, his eyes filled with determination. We're ready, Jiraiya-sama. We won't let you down. Kushina, Mikoto, and Obito nodded in agreement, their resolve mirroring Naruto's. Jiraiya's expression softened slightly, a hint of pride in his eyes. Good. Because from this point on, your training is going to be tougher than anything you've faced before. But if you can handle it, you'll become some of the strongest shinobi this village has ever seen. With that, Jiraiya led them back to the center of the courtyard, where they continued their training late into the evening. Each exercise was more challenging than the last, pushing them to their limits and beyond. But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Naruto couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. The future was uncertain, filled with dangers and challenges he couldn't yet foresee. But with his friends by his side, and with Jiraiya's guidance, he knew they could face whatever came their way. After the training, at the Senju compound, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the Senju compound as twilight settled in. The sky gradually darkened, the last remnants of daylight giving way to the deep indigo of the evening. Naruto, Kushina, Mikoto, and Obito trudged wearily back to the main house, their bodies aching from the grueling training session under Jiraiya's watchful eye. The training had been intense, pushing them to the limits of their physical and mental endurance. Jiraiya's methods were relentless, designed to break them down and build them back up stronger than before. Each of them had faced their own struggles, but the shared experience had only served to strengthen their bonds. As they walked, the sound of their footsteps on the gravel path was the only noise that broke the silence of the compound. The day's exertions had left them too tired for conversation, each lost in their own thoughts. Naruto, however, found no peace in the quiet. The events of the day played on a loop in his mind, but his thoughts kept drifting back to something far more pressing. The destruction of Uzushiogakure, the hidden village of his clan, loomed like a dark cloud over his consciousness. He knew the attack was coming. The memory of that tragic day was etched into his mind, a scar that had never healed. He had seen it once before, the devastation, the loss, the countless lives extinguished in an instant. And he had vowed never to let it happen again. But now that he was here, back in this time, the weight of that promise felt heavier than ever. "Ni-san, are you okay?" Kushina's voice broke through his thoughts, drawing him back to the present. Naruto glanced at her, offering a small smile. "Yeah, I'm fine, just thinking." Kushina's eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of concern in her expression. She knew her brother well enough to sense when something was bothering him. "About the training." "Partly," Naruto replied, though the truth was much more complicated. "It's just a lot to take in, you know." Kushina nodded, her own thoughts still lingering on the day's events. "Jiraiya-sama is really pushing us, but I guess that's what we need. We have to be ready for whatever's coming." "Yeah, we do," Naruto agreed, though his mind was still elsewhere. The training was important, but the real challenge was yet to come. Kushina studied him for a moment longer, her concern deepening. But Naruto's expression remained guarded, his thoughts hidden behind a carefully composed facade. She sighed softly, deciding to let it go for now. "Just don't push yourself too hard, Ni-san. We're all in this together." Naruto nodded, appreciating her concern but knowing that there were some burdens he had to carry alone. "Don't worry, Nei-chan. I've got this." Ahead of them, Mikoto and Obito walked side by side, their footsteps synchronizing with each other. Mikoto glanced over her shoulder at Naruto and Kushina, her dark eyes thoughtful. "You two were really in sync today," she commented. "It was like you could read each other's minds." Naruto chuckled lightly, though his heart wasn't fully in it. "We've had a lot of practice. Besides, Kushina's got my back. And I've got yours," Kushina added with a smile, though the undercurrent of worry hadn't entirely left her eyes. Obito, ever the optimist, grinned widely. "You guys were awesome out there. Kushina, those chakra chains of yours are amazing. And Naruto, you were so fast. I could barely keep up." "Thanks, Obito," Naruto said, though his thoughts were still distant. He appreciated the praise, but there was no time to bask in it. Not when Uzushiyogakure's future hung in the balance. As they continued down the path, the group lapsed into a comfortable silence. The camaraderie they shared was a testament to the bonds they had forged, but for Naruto, each step brought him closer to the moment when he would have to act alone. The weight of his knowledge pressed down on him like a physical burden, the responsibility almost suffocating in its intensity. When they finally reached the main house, Jiraiya was waiting for them on the porch, his arms crossed over his chest. He looked over the group, his sharp eyes taking in their exhaustion, the way their shoulders sagged with fatigue. "You all did well today," he said, his tone gruff but not unkind. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's training will be even tougher, so you'll need your strength." The group nodded, too tired to offer more than a few murmurs of agreement. Jiraiya watched as they headed inside, his expression unreadable. But when his gaze landed on Naruto, it lingered for a moment longer than necessary, a flicker of something, concern, perhaps, crossing his features before he turned away. Naruto hesitated at the entrance, watching Jiraiya walk off into the night, the Sanin's figure disappearing into the shadows. He could feel the older man's eyes on him, even after he was gone, and it left him with a sense of unease. Did Jiraiya suspect something? Had he noticed the turmoil brewing beneath Naruto's calm exterior? But there was no time to dwell on it. Naruto waited until the others had disappeared into their rooms, the sounds of their movements fading as they settled in for the night. Once he was certain he was alone, he slipped out of the house, his footsteps silent as he made his way to a secluded part of the compound. The moon was high in the sky, casting pale light over the landscape. The trees rustled softly in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets to the night. It was a peaceful scene, almost too peaceful given what was about to unfold. Naruto found a spot beneath a large oak tree, its ancient branches spreading wide above him, casting deep shadows on the ground. He leaned against the trunk, the rough bark pressing into his back, grounding him as he tried to collect his thoughts. This is it, he thought to himself, his heart pounding with anticipation. There's no turning back now. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath to steady his nerves. The tailed beasts within him stirred, their presence a familiar weight in his mind. Kurama, the Nine Tails, was the first to speak, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through Naruto's thoughts. "You're thinking of interfering with the attack on Uzushiogakure, aren't you, Kit?" Kurama's tone was a mix of curiosity and concern, the fox's usual arrogance tempered by the seriousness of the situation. Naruto nodded slightly, his thoughts focused. "I have to, Kurama. I can't let it happen again." Not after everything I've seen. Kurama was silent for a moment, considering Naruto's words. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost gentle. But you know the risks, right? Altering the past could have serious consequences. You could change the future in ways you can't predict. I know, Naruto replied, his voice firm. But I'm willing to take that risk. I won't let my clan be destroyed again. Not if I can stop it. The other tailed beasts were quiet, their thoughts a background hum in Naruto's mind. He could feel their awareness, their understanding of the gravity of his decision. They knew what this meant to him, even if they didn't fully agree with the dangers involved. If you're going to do this, you'll need to be careful, Kurama continued, his tone serious. You can't afford to reveal too much of your power. And you definitely can't let anyone know you're involved. Agreed, Naruto thought, his mind racing through the possibilities. I'll use the cover of night and act quickly. I'll only do what's necessary to stop the attack and capture someone who knows who's behind it. Kurama didn't respond immediately, but Naruto could sense his concern. The fox had always been a voice of caution, and Naruto appreciated that more than ever now. Be careful, Naruto. We're with you, but this is a dangerous game you're playing. Naruto smiled slightly, feeling the warmth of Kurama's support. Thanks, Kurama. I'll be careful. I promise. He sat there for a while longer, gathering his thoughts, preparing himself for what was to come. The night around him was peaceful, the quiet only broken by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of an owl. It was hard to believe that such tranquility could exist so close to the impending violence. But Naruto knew better than to be lulled into a false sense of security. The calm before the storm was often the most dangerous time, and he needed to be ready. The weight of his responsibility pressed down on him, but he bore it willingly, knowing that he was the only one who could do what needed to be done. Finally, when the moon was high in the sky, casting pale light through the trees, Naruto stood. He stretched out his senses one last time, ensuring that the compound was quiet, that no one had noticed his absence. Satisfied, he turned and slipped into the shadows, his form disappearing into the night. Late that night, in the forest near Uzushiogakure. The journey to Uzushiogakure was swift, but to Naruto, it felt like an eternity. He moved through the dense forest with the speed and silence of a shadow, the branches and underbrush barely registering as he passed. The trees, tall and ancient, stretched overhead, their leaves forming a thick canopy that blotted out much of the moonlight. The darkness was almost absolute, but it didn't hinder Naruto. His senses were sharp, heightened by sage mode, the natural energy of the forest flowing into him with every breath. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the danger that lurked within. The air was thick with tension, the usual sounds of night, crickets, owls, the rustling of leaves, muted, as though the very land was preparing for the violence to come. Naruto moved swiftly, his mind focused on the mission ahead. He had to reach the village before the enemy forces did. He had to stop them before they could breach the walls, before they could unleash the destruction that would decimate his clan. As he neared the edge of the forest, the trees began to thin out, giving way to a clear view of Uzushiogakare's outer walls. The village lay quiet and still, its inhabitants asleep, unaware of the impending danger. The walls, built of stone and reinforced with powerful seals, stood tall and proud, a testament to the Uzumaki clan's strength and resilience. But Naruto knew that strength alone would not be enough to save them. The enemy forces were well prepared, their numbers vast and their intent deadly. They had come to destroy the Uzumaki, to erase the village from existence, and they would not stop until their mission was complete. Naruto crouched low, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of the enemy. His heightened senses picked up the faint rustle of movement, the subtle shift of shadows against the trees. They were here. His heart pounded in his chest, not with fear, but with the urgency of what he had to do. The enemy shinobi were well hidden, their positions carefully chosen to avoid detection. But they couldn't hide from him. He could sense their presence, feel the chakra signatures pulsing through the night air. There are more of them than I thought, he realized, counting at least 24 enemy shinobi, scattered around the perimeter of the village. This is going to be tricky. He reached out to the tailed beasts within him, their power a comforting presence in his mind. I'm going to need all of you, he said, his voice steady despite the tension in his body. We're ready, Son Goku, the four tails, rumbled, his voice deep and reassuring. Let's show them what happens when they mess with the Uzumaki clan, Shukaku added, his tone fierce and eager. Naruto smiled grimly, feeling the surge of power from the tailed beasts. Let's do this. He moved swiftly, a blur in the night, his footsteps silent on the forest floor. He approached the first group of enemy shinobi, 3 of them, who were setting up explosive tags along the village's outer wall. Their faces were hidden beneath masks, their movements quick and efficient as they prepared to breach the defenses. Naruto waited, watching them from the shadows. He had to be precise. One wrong move could alert the others, and he couldn't afford that. He took a deep breath, then struck. He moved faster than the eye could follow, his body a blur of motion as he appeared behind the first shinobi. With a swift, silent strike, he knocked the man out, catching his body before it hit the ground. The second shinobi turned, his eyes widening in shock as he saw his comrade fall, but Naruto was already on him, a quick blow to the head rendering him unconscious. The third shinobi didn't even have time to react before Naruto was upon him, his fist connecting with the man's jaw, sending him crumpling to the ground. Naruto dragged the bodies into the shadows, hiding them beneath the thick underbrush. He removed the explosive tags, disarming them carefully before moving on to the next group. The forest was eerily silent as Naruto continued his mission, his senses on high alert. He knew there were more enemy shinobi hidden in the darkness, and he couldn't afford to let his guard down. Each step was calculated, each movement precise as he made his way through the shadows, his heart pounding in his chest. He repeated the process as he circled the village, systematically taking out the enemy forces before they could launch their attack. His heart raced with the thrill of the mission, the knowledge that he was protecting his clan driving him forward. But he was careful not to use any techniques that could give away his identity, relying on his taijutsu, speed, and stealth to neutralize the threat. Naruto's movements were fluid and precise, his mind focused on the task at hand. Each strike was calculated, each step planned with the precision of a master strategist. He was a force of nature, a silent protector moving through the night with the grace of a predator and the determination of a warrior. The enemy shinobi, skilled and deadly though they were, stood no chance against him. Finally, after what felt like hours, Naruto reached the center of the enemy forces. Here, hidden in a clearing deep within the forest, was a small group of higher-ranking shinobi. They were gathered around a map, discussing their strategy in low, urgent tones. Naruto recognized one of them, a commander from Iwa, known for his cruelty in battle. This was the man leading the attack. Naruto crouched in the shadows, listening to their conversation. The commander was speaking, his voice cold and calculating. "We'll breach the defenses here," he said, pointing to a spot on the map. "Once we're inside, the village will fall within minutes. The Uzumaki won't know what hit them." Naruto's blood boiled at the man's words. He had to act now. He took a deep breath, centering himself. He couldn't afford to reveal too much power, but he needed to ensure this commander didn't escape. He moved quickly, appearing behind the group in an instant. Before they could react, Naruto struck. He incapacitated the lower-ranking shinobi with swift, precise movements, leaving only the commander conscious. The man barely had time to register what was happening before Naruto's hand was around his throat, lifting him off the ground with ease. "Who sent you?" Naruto demanded, his voice low and dangerous, his grip tightening around the man's throat. The commander struggled, his eyes wide with fear. Who are you?" "Answer the question," Naruto growled, his voice a deadly whisper. The commander gasped for air, his mind racing. He had faced many enemies in his time, but the presence before him was unlike anything he had encountered. The power radiating from this person, it was terrifying. Danzo. The commander finally choked out, his voice trembling. It was Danzo. He provided the information, gave us the secret passage into the village. Naruto's eyes narrowed, a cold fury building inside him. Danzo. The name sent a wave of anger through him. He had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed sent his emotions into turmoil. Danzo had always been a shadowy figure, manipulating events from behind the scenes. But to betray Uzushiogakure like this. Naruto forced himself to stay calm, his grip on the commander unwavering. "You're going to help me stop this attack," he said coldly. "Or I'll make sure you never see the light of day again." The commander nodded frantically, too terrified to resist. Naruto lowered him to the ground, still keeping a firm grip on him. "You're going to call off the attack and order your men to retreat," Naruto instructed, his tone brooking no argument. "Tell them it was a false alarm." The commander swallowed hard, knowing he had no choice. He pulled out a small communication device and relayed the orders, his voice shaking with fear. Naruto watched him closely, ensuring there were no tricks, no coded messages. Once the commander had finished, Naruto knocked him out with a swift blow to the head and hid him with the rest of the unconscious shinobi. The night was still, the threat to Uzushiogakure averted, for now. Naruto stood in the clearing, breathing heavily, his mind racing. He had done it. The village was safe. But as he turned to leave, the weight of what he had learned pressed down on him. Danzo's betrayal was a threat that couldn't be ignored. He would have to deal with it, but for now, Uzushiogakure was safe, and that was what mattered most. Good job, Naruto, Kurama's voice rumbled in his mind, a rare note of approval in his tone. Thanks, Kurama, Naruto replied, his exhaustion beginning to catch up with him. But we're not done yet. We need to make sure this never happens again. As Naruto made his way back to the Senju compound, he knew he would have to tread carefully. The information he had obtained was explosive, and revealing it too soon could put everything at risk. But for now, Uzushiogakure was safe, and that was what mattered most. The return to the Senju compound. Late at night, the forest was eerily silent as Naruto made his way back toward the Senju compound. The mission had been a success, Uzushiogakure was safe for now, but the tension in his body hadn't eased. The adrenaline that had fueled him during the confrontation with the enemy commander had begun to wane, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. Naruto moved through the trees with practiced ease, his footsteps silent on the forest floor. The natural energy from Sage Mode still lingered in his system, heightening his senses, allowing him to pick up on the faintest sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the soft whisper of the wind through the trees. But despite the serenity of the night, Naruto's mind was far from calm. The revelation that Danzo had orchestrated the attack on Uzushiogakure churned in his thoughts like a storm. He had suspected Danzo's involvement, but hearing it confirmed filled him with a cold fury. Danzo had always been a manipulative figure, operating from the shadows, but this was a betrayal on a scale that Naruto could barely comprehend. How many lives were put at risk because of his actions? Naruto thought bitterly. How many more would be if I hadn't intervened? The answer was too horrifying to contemplate. Naruto clenched his fists, the bark of a nearby tree cracking under the pressure of his grip. He had done what he could to stop the attack, but the danger wasn't over. Danzo was still out there, plotting, scheming, and as long as he remained unchecked, there would always be a threat to the people Naruto cared about. We need to be careful, Kurama's voice rumbled in his mind, the fox's tone serious. Danzo won't stop with this. He'll find another way to achieve his goals. He always does. I know, Naruto replied, his thoughts laced with determination. But this time, I'm going to stop him. No matter what it takes. Kurama was silent for a moment, his presence a comforting weight in Naruto's mind. Just remember, kid, we can't afford to act recklessly. There's too much at stake. Naruto nodded, understanding the gravity of Kurama's words. He couldn't let his anger cloud his judgment. Danzo was dangerous, but Naruto needed to be smarter, more strategic. A direct confrontation could lead to disastrous consequences, especially since Danzo was deeply entrenched in Konoha's political landscape. As he approached the outskirts of the Senju compound, Naruto slowed his pace, his senses stretching out to ensure that the area was clear. The compound was quiet, its inhabitants asleep, unaware of the mission Naruto had just undertaken. He felt a pang of guilt at keeping such secrets from his friends, especially Kushina. But he knew it was necessary. The fewer people who knew about his actions, the better. Naruto slipped back into the compound through one of the side entrances, his movements quiet and deliberate. He made his way to his room, carefully avoiding the creaky floorboards he had memorized over the past few weeks. The last thing he needed was to wake someone and have to explain where he had been. When he finally reached his room, Naruto closed the door behind him with a soft click, leaning against it for a moment as he let out a slow breath. The room was dimly lit by the pale light of the moon filtering through the shoji screens. The familiar scent of pine wood and the faint traces of incense that clung to the walls offered a small measure of comfort, but it did little to ease the turmoil inside him. Naruto crossed the room and sat down on the tatami mat, resting his back against the wall. His mind was still racing, replaying the events of the night over and over, examining every detail, every decision he had made. He had done what was necessary to protect Uzushiogakure, but the victory felt hollow. The village was safe, but the threat of Danzo loomed larger than ever. Naruto knew that this was just the beginning of a long and dangerous game, one where the stakes were impossibly high and the cost of failure was unthinkable. You did well, Naruto. Matabi, the two tails, spoke up, her voice soft and soothing. You protected your people. That's what matters. She's right, Kokuo, the five tails, added, his tone filled with approval. You did what needed to be done, and you did it without drawing unnecessary attention to yourself. Naruto sighed, rubbing his temples as he tried to ease the tension in his head. Thanks, guys. But I can't shake the feeling that this is far from over. Danzo won't just give up because his plan failed. He'll come up with something else, something even more dangerous. Then we'll be ready. Chome, the seven tails, chirped in, her usually bubbly tone serious. You're not alone in this, Naruto. We're with you all the way. Naruto smiled slightly, the warmth of their support helping to calm the storm inside him. I know. And I'm grateful for that. We'll face whatever comes next together. The tailed beasts fell silent, their presence a reassuring weight in the back of Naruto's mind. He took a deep breath, trying to let go of the lingering tension. The night had been long, and his body ached with fatigue, but he knew that sleep would not come easily. Naruto's thoughts drifted back to Uzushiogakure, to the faces of the people he had saved, the children, the elderly, the men and women who had no idea how close they had come to annihilation. He had saved them, but the cost of that victory was a secret he would have to bear alone. For now, he reminded himself. For now, the village is safe. That's all that matters. He closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the wall as he tried to quiet his mind. But even in the darkness behind his eyelids, the images of the night's events played on a loop. Danzo's name, the enemy commander's fear, the cold fury that had surged through him when he had realized the extent of the betrayal. Naruto's hands tightened into fists at the memory, the anger still simmering just beneath the surface. Danzo had put so many lives at risk, all for his own ambitions. He had betrayed Konoha, the village he claimed to serve, and he had betrayed the Uzumaki clan in the process. It was unforgivable. But Naruto knew that acting on that anger could lead to disaster. He needed to be careful, to plan his next move carefully. Danzo was dangerous, but he was also cunning and resourceful. A direct confrontation would only play into Danzo's hands, giving him the excuse he needed to turn the situation to his advantage. We'll need to gather information, Naruto thought, his mind already turning over possibilities. Find out what else Danzo is planning, what his next move might be. We can't afford to be blindsided again. The tailed beasts murmured their agreement, their thoughts aligning with Naruto's. It was a dangerous game they were playing, but it was one they had no choice but to win. Naruto opened his eyes, the pale light of the moon casting long shadows across the room. The night was still, the only sound the soft rustle of leaves outside the window. But despite the calm, Naruto knew that this was only the beginning. The real battle was yet to come. He stood slowly, his muscles protesting the movement after the night's exertions. He crossed the room to the small table by the window, where a pitcher of water and a cup sat waiting. He poured himself a cup, the cool liquid soothing his parched throat as he drank. As he set the cup down, Naruto's eyes were drawn to the window, where the first faint light of dawn was beginning to touch the horizon. The night was ending, but Naruto's mind was still racing, the events of the night refusing to let him rest. There was so much to do, so much to prepare for. Danzo's betrayal was just the beginning, a taste of the dangers that lay ahead. Naruto knew that he couldn't afford to let his guard down, not for a moment. The future was uncertain, filled with threats both known and unknown. But he was determined to face them, to protect those he cared about, no matter the cost. Naruto turned away from the window, his resolve hardening as he prepared himself for the challenges that lay ahead. He had come back to this time for a reason, and he wouldn't let anything, or anyone, stand in his way. Later that morning, in the Senju compound, the morning light filtered through the shoji screens, casting a soft, golden glow across the tatami mats. The compound was beginning to stir with activity as the inhabitants woke from their slumber. The birds outside chirped cheerfully, unaware of the events that had transpired during the night. Naruto had barely slept, his mind too restless to find peace. He had spent the early hours of the morning meditating, trying to calm his thoughts and center himself. It had helped, but the weight of his mission still pressed heavily on his shoulders. As he rose from his seated position, Naruto stretched, trying to work out the stiffness in his muscles. The compound was still quiet, most of the others still in bed. He decided to take advantage of the solitude to gather his thoughts and plan his next steps. He made his way to the small garden at the center of the compound, the soft crunch of gravel underfoot the only sound as he walked. The garden was a place of peace and reflection, a sanctuary where the mind could find clarity. The scent of blooming flowers filled the air, and the gentle trickle of water from the koi pond provided a soothing backdrop. Naruto found a bench beneath a cherry blossom tree and sat down, his eyes fixed on the koi swimming lazily in the pond. The morning light danced on the water's surface, creating ripples that spread out in concentric circles. It was a beautiful sight, one that contrasted sharply with the darkness that had filled his thoughts the night before. But even here, in this place of peace, Naruto couldn't escape the feeling of unease that gnawed at him. The events of the night played over and over in his mind, the tension in his body refusing to dissipate. Danzo won't stop with this, Naruto thought, his gaze distant as he stared at the water. He'll find another way. And when he does, I need to be ready. But how? How could he protect Uzushiogakure, protect Konoha, without drawing attention to himself? Without revealing the full extent of his power or his knowledge of the future? Naruto closed his eyes, trying to clear his mind. He needed to think, to plan. But the more he tried to focus, the more his thoughts spiraled, the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him like a physical burden. Maybe I should talk to someone, Naruto thought, the idea forming slowly in his mind. But who? Who can I trust with this? The obvious choice was Jiraiya. The Sannin had always been a mentor and a friend to Naruto in the future, someone he could rely on for advice and guidance. But this wasn't the Jiraiya he knew. This Jiraiya was from a time before Naruto's birth, before the tragedies that had shaped the man Naruto had known. Would Jiraiya believe him if he told him the truth? Would he understand? Or would he see Naruto as a threat, someone who needed to be controlled? The risk was too great. Naruto couldn't afford to trust anyone with the full truth, not yet. He would have to navigate this path alone, at least for now. One step at a time, Naruto reminded himself. Focus on the immediate threat. Deal with Danzo first, then worry about the rest. It was a plan, albeit a tenuous one, but it was better than nothing. Naruto opened his eyes, his resolve hardening as he stared at the koi pond. He would find a way to protect Uzushiogakure, to protect Konoha, without revealing his true nature. He had to. As Naruto sat there, lost in thought, he didn't notice the figure approaching from behind. It wasn't until the soft sound of footsteps on gravel reached his ears that he turned, his senses snapping back to full alertness. It was Jiraiya. The Sannin approached with his usual easy gait, but there was a sharpness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He came to a stop beside Naruto, looking down at him with an unreadable expression. "Mind if I join you?" Jiraiya asked, his voice casual, but Naruto could sense the underlying tension. Naruto nodded, trying to mask his surprise. "Of course, Jiraiya-sama." Jiraiya sat down on the bench next to Naruto, his gaze drifting to the koi pond. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. "You were up early," Jiraiya said finally, his tone light but probing. "Couldn't sleep?" Naruto shrugged, keeping his expression neutral. "Something like that. Just had a lot on my mind." Jiraiya nodded, though Naruto could see the curiosity in his eyes. "I can understand that. You've been through a lot recently. It's natural to have things weighing on you." Naruto nodded, his mind racing as he tried to anticipate where this conversation was going. Did Jiraiya suspect something? Had he noticed Naruto's absence during the night? But Jiraiya's next words caught Naruto off guard. "You've got a lot of potential, Naruto," Jiraiya said, his tone more serious now. "I've seen the way you train, the way you push yourself. You've got a fire in you that reminds me of someone else I knew." Naruto's heart skipped a beat. He knew who Jiraiya was talking about, Minato Namikaze. Minato hadn't yet become the fourth Hokage, but even now, he was already a rising star in Konoha, known for his brilliance and potential. But Naruto couldn't acknowledge that connection. "Not yet. I'm just trying to do my best," Naruto replied, keeping his tone humble. "There's a lot at stake, and I don't want to let anyone down." Jiraiya nodded, his gaze still fixed on the koi pond. "I respect that. But remember, you don't have to do it all alone. You've got people around you who care, who want to help." Naruto swallowed, the weight of those words pressing down on him. He knew Jiraiya meant well, but the truth was, Naruto was more alone than Jiraiya could ever understand. I appreciate that, Jiraiya-sama, Naruto said quietly. But some things I have to figure out on my own. Jiraiya turned to look at him then, his eyes sharp and discerning. Just don't carry too much on those shoulders of yours, kid. Even the strongest of us can't do it all. Naruto met his gaze, a flicker of emotion passing between them. For a moment, he considered telling Jiraiya the truth, laying it all out there, and asking for his guidance. But the risk was too great. The timeline was too fragile, and Naruto couldn't afford to make a mistake. I'll keep that in mind, Naruto said finally, his tone carefully neutral. Jiraiya studied him for a moment longer before nodding, seemingly satisfied with the answer. He stood, stretching his arms above his head as he let out a yawn. Well, I'd better get moving. We've got a lot of training ahead of us, and I don't want you kids slacking off. Naruto nodded, standing as well. We won't. You can count on that. Jiraiya clapped him on the shoulder, a grin breaking through the seriousness of his expression. I know I can. You're going to do great things, Naruto. With that, Jiraiya turned and walked away, leaving Naruto alone by the koi pond. Naruto watched him go, the Sanin's words echoing in his mind. Great things, Naruto thought, a bitter smile tugging at the corners of his lips. If only you knew. As the sun continued to rise, casting golden light over the garden, Naruto knew that the day ahead would be filled with challenges. But he also knew that he couldn't let his guard down, not for a moment. The battle to protect Uzushiogakure was far from over, and Danzo was still out there, waiting for his next move. Naruto took a deep breath, steeling himself for the road ahead. He would do whatever it took to protect those he cared about, no matter the cost. Even if it meant walking this path alone. The aftermath. At the Senju compound. The sun had fully risen, casting its warm light across the Senju compound as the day officially began. The quiet of the early morning had given way to the sounds of daily life, footsteps on gravel, doors sliding open, and the murmur of voices as the compound's inhabitants went about their routines. Naruto had returned to his room after his conversation with Jiraiya, his mind still buzzing with thoughts and plans. He had managed to conceal his true feelings during their talk, but the weight of his mission pressed heavily on him, making it hard to focus on anything else. As he sat cross-legged on the tatami mat, his thoughts drifted back to the night before. The memory of the enemy commander's terrified expression, the revelation of Danzo's involvement, and the cold fury that had surged through Naruto's veins all played out in his mind like a loop. Danzo, Naruto thought, his jaw tightening with resolve. I can't let him get away with this. But I have to be careful. Naruto knew he couldn't confront Danzo directly. Doing so could unravel the delicate balance of the timeline he was trying to protect. Any overt action against someone as influential and cunning as Danzo could set off a chain of events that Naruto might not be able to control. The last thing he wanted was to jeopardize everything by acting recklessly. But how could he protect Uzushiogakure and Konoha without revealing too much? How could he counter Danzo's schemes without drawing attention to himself or altering the timeline? Naruto needed a plan, one that would allow him to neutralize Danzo's threat from the shadows. But the more he thought about it, the more complex and dangerous the situation seemed. His musings were interrupted by a knock at the door, followed by Kushina's voice. "Ni-san, are you in there?" Naruto quickly pushed his thoughts aside, forcing a smile onto his face as he called out, "Yeah, I'm here. Come in." The door slid open, and Kushina stepped inside, her usual bright smile in place. But there was a flicker of concern in her eyes as she looked at him. "I noticed you were up early this morning," she said, closing the door behind her. "Is everything okay?" Naruto nodded, trying to keep his tone casual. "Just had some things on my mind. Nothing to worry about." Kushina didn't look entirely convinced, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she walked over and sat down beside him, her expression softening. "You know you can talk to me, right? If something's bothering you, I'm here." Naruto's heart warmed at her words. Despite everything, Kushina was always there for him, always ready to support him no matter what. But he couldn't burden her with the truth, not now, when the stakes were so high. "I know, Nei-chan," Naruto said, reaching out to ruffle her hair. "Thanks. But I'm okay, really. Just need to clear my head, that's all." Kushina pouted at the gesture, but she didn't push him further. Instead, she leaned back on her hands, looking out the window at the garden beyond. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? Hard to believe there's so much going on in the world. Naruto followed her gaze, his eyes softening as he took in the peaceful scene. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, their delicate pink petals drifting gently to the ground with each breeze. The koi pond sparkled in the sunlight, the fish swimming lazily beneath the surface. It was a moment of serenity, a stark contrast to the turmoil that brewed beneath the surface. Yeah, Naruto agreed, his voice quiet. It's hard to believe. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, simply enjoying the tranquility of the morning. But Naruto's thoughts were never far from the mission ahead. The peace of the compound was a fragile thing, one that could be shattered at any moment by the forces that threatened their world. Ni-san, Kushina began, her tone a little more serious now. I've been thinking about everything that's happening. The war, the attacks, all of it. I want to do more. I don't want to just sit here and wait for things to happen. Naruto looked at her, his heart swelling with pride and concern. Kushina was strong, fierce, and determined, traits that would make her an incredible kunoichi. But he also knew the dangers that awaited her, the battles she would face if she followed this path. Kushina, Naruto said, his tone gentle but firm. You're already doing a lot. Training with Jiraiya, learning to control your chakra chains, that's all important. But you don't have to take on everything by yourself. I know, she replied, her gaze unwavering. But I want to be ready. I want to be able to protect the people I care about. Just like you. Naruto's chest tightened at her words. Kushina had always been protective, always willing to fight for those she loved. It was a trait they shared, but it also made her vulnerable to the same dangers that haunted him. I understand, Naruto said softly. And I'm proud of you, Nei-chan. But just remember, you don't have to do it alone. We're in this together. Kushina smiled at that, a warm, genuine smile that eased some of the tension in Naruto's heart. Together, huh? That sounds good to me. They sat there for a while longer, the silence between them now comfortable, filled with the unspoken bond of siblings who understood each other on a deep, unspoken level. But Naruto knew that this moment of peace wouldn't last. The world outside the compound was filled with threats, and he had to be ready for whatever came next. Later that day, in the training field was a large, open space surrounded by trees, the ground marked with the scars of countless battles and training sessions. The air was filled with the sound of exertion, grunts, the thud of kunai hitting targets, and the occasional shout as someone executed a particularly difficult technique. Naruto, Kushina, Mikoto, and Obito stood in a loose circle, Jiraiya watching them with a critical eye as they went through their drills. The Sannin was pushing them hard today, testing their limits and forcing them to adapt to new challenges. Keep your focus, Obito. Jiraiya called out as the young Uchiha attempted a fireball jutsu. Your chakra control needs work. Obito gritted his teeth, frustration clear on his face as his fireball fizzled out before it could reach its target. But he didn't give up, he tried again, pouring more chakra into the technique, determined to get it right. Mikoto, on the other hand, was a picture of concentration, her movements fluid and precise as she executed a series of kunai throws that hit their marks with pinpoint accuracy. She was a natural, her skills honed by years of training and a fierce dedication to her craft. Kushina was next, her chakra chains glowing with a soft golden light as she practiced controlling them. The chains moved with surprising grace and speed, whipping through the air as she directed them with her mind. But there was still a hint of hesitation in her movements, a lack of confidence that Jiraiya was determined to break. Naruto, step it up. Jiraiya barked, his gaze shifting to Naruto. You're holding back, show me what you're really made of. Naruto nodded, his expression serious as he prepared for his turn. He had been careful not to reveal too much during their training, always holding back just enough to avoid drawing suspicion. But he couldn't afford to be too cautious, Jiraiya was watching, and he needed to prove that he was capable. Taking a deep breath, Naruto gathered his chakra, focusing it into his limbs as he prepared for the task at hand. He could feel the power surging through him, the tailed beasts lending him their strength as he prepared to strike. With a burst of speed, Naruto launched himself into a series of rapid movements, taijutsu strikes combined with swift, precise ninjutsu. His fists and feet moved like blurs, connecting with the practice targets with enough force to send them flying. Each strike was followed by a burst of chakra, enhancing his movements and increasing the power of his attacks. Jiraiya watched with narrowed eyes, his arms crossed over his chest as he observed Naruto's performance. The Sannin's expression was unreadable, but there was a glint of something, approval, perhaps, in his eyes as he watched Naruto work. But even as Naruto pushed himself to meet Jiraiya's expectations, he was careful to hold back just enough. He couldn't afford to show his full strength, not here, not now. There was too much at stake, too many secrets that needed to be kept. After a few more minutes, Jiraiya called a halt to the session, clapping his hands to get their attention. "All right, that's enough for today. You all did well, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Tomorrow, we'll focus on teamwork exercises. You need to learn how to fight as a unit, not just as individuals." The group nodded, their faces flushed with exertion as they caught their breath. Naruto could see the determination in their eyes, the resolve to improve and become stronger. It was a resolve he shared, but his reasons were far more complex. As they began to pack up their gear, Jiraiya approached Naruto, his expression thoughtful. "You're improving, Naruto. But I can tell you're holding back. You need to push yourself harder if you want to reach your full potential." Naruto nodded, keeping his tone neutral. "I'll keep that in mind, Jiraiya-sama. I just don't want to overdo it." Jiraiya's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't press the issue. "Just remember, Naruto, there's a difference between caution and fear. Don't let fear hold you back." Naruto's heart skipped a beat at those words, but he forced himself to smile. "I won't, Jiraiya-sama. Thanks for the advice." Jiraiya studied him for a moment longer before nodding. "All right, get some rest, all of you. We'll pick up where we left off tomorrow." As Jiraiya walked away, Naruto felt a knot of tension in his chest. The Sannin was perceptive, and Naruto knew that he couldn't afford to let his guard down. But at the same time, he couldn't ignore the truth in Jiraiya's words. There was a fine line between caution and fear, and Naruto needed to find the balance between the two. But there was no time to dwell on it. As the group began to disperse, Naruto caught Kushina's eye, giving her a reassuring smile. She smiled back, though there was a hint of concern in her gaze. "See you later, Nei-chan," Naruto said as he shouldered his pack. "Yeah," Kushina replied, her smile brightening. "See you, Ni-san." With that, Naruto turned and began to make his way back to the compound. His mind was already racing with plans and strategies, his thoughts focused on the mission ahead. Danzo was still out there, and Naruto knew that he needed to act before the man could put another plan into motion. But how? How could he stop Danzo without revealing his true nature? The answer wasn't clear, but Naruto knew that he couldn't afford to wait. The longer he delayed, the more dangerous the situation would become. As he walked through the forest, the trees casting long shadows on the ground, Naruto's resolve hardened. He would find a way to protect Uzushiogakure, to protect Konoha, no matter the cost. But he had to be smart about it. A direct confrontation with Danzo would risk unraveling the very fabric of the timeline. Naruto would have to act with the utmost caution. That night, in the Senju compound, the moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale light over the Senju compound. The compound was quiet, its inhabitants asleep, the only sounds the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant chirp of crickets. But Naruto was awake, sitting cross-legged on the tatami mat in his room, his mind too restless to find peace. The events of the day played over and over in his mind, the tension in his chest refusing to dissipate. He had to act, but he couldn't act impulsively. Every move had to be calculated. "Kurama," Naruto thought, reaching out to the Nine Tails. "We need to talk." Kurama stirred in his mind, the fox's presence a comforting weight. "What is it, Kit?" "I can't confront Danzo directly," Naruto replied, his resolve clear. "It would ruin everything. But I need to find a way to stop him. He's too dangerous to leave unchecked." Kurama was silent for a moment, considering Naruto's words. When he spoke again, his tone was serious. "You're right. Confronting Danzo could have catastrophic consequences. But there are other ways to counter him. You don't have to face him head-on." Naruto nodded, his thoughts already racing with possibilities. "I'll need to gather information. I need to know what Danzo's next move is, what he's planning. If I can stay one step ahead of him, I can find a way to neutralize the threat without exposing myself." Kurama's voice was a low rumble in Naruto's mind. "Information is power, Kit. Use it wisely. But be careful. Danzo is not to be underestimated." "I know," Naruto thought, his resolve hardening. But I won't let him destroy everything. Not while I'm here. With that, Naruto stood, his mind buzzing with the plans he needed to put into motion. He wouldn't confront Danzo directly, but he would find a way to stop him. It would take time, patience, and a great deal of caution, but Naruto was willing to do whatever it took. As he gazed out at the moonlit garden, Naruto felt the weight of his mission pressing down on him. But he was ready. He had come back to this time for a reason, and he wouldn't let anyone, not even Danzo, stand in his way. He would protect his loved ones, protect Uzushiogakure, protect Konoha, no matter the cost. The following days, in the Senju compound, the days that followed were tense, filled with a sense of unease that lingered over the Senju compound like a storm cloud. Naruto continued his training with Jiraiya, Kushina, Mikoto, and Obito, all while carefully gathering information about Danzo's activities. He knew that any misstep could lead to disastrous consequences, so he moved with the utmost caution, weaving through the intricacies of the political landscape like a shadow. Jiraiya pushed them harder with each passing day, honing their skills and testing their limits. Naruto could feel the pressure mounting, not just from the training, but from the weight of the secrets he carried. He was walking a razor's edge, and one wrong move could send everything crashing down. Kushina noticed the change in him, the way he seemed more focused, more serious. She would often catch him lost in thought, his brow furrowed as if he were carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. But every time she asked, Naruto would brush it off with a smile, reassuring her that everything was fine. But Naruto knew that things were far from fine. The threat of Danzo loomed over him like a dark shadow, and he could feel the noose tightening around Uzushiogakure. He had to act, but he had to do so in a way that wouldn't attract attention. He had to be smart, calculated, and above all, patient. One night, in the Senju compound, it was a quiet night, the moon hanging high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the compound. Most of the inhabitants were asleep, their breathing deep and even as they rested. But Naruto was awake, his mind too restless to find peace. He sat by the window, gazing out at the garden, his thoughts racing. He had gathered enough information to know that Danzo was planning something big, something that could spell disaster for Uzushiogakure. But Naruto couldn't confront him directly, the risks were too great. Instead, he needed to find a way to counter Danzo's plans without exposing himself or altering the timeline. Kurama, Naruto thought, reaching out to the Nine Tails. We need to move soon. Danzo's getting closer to executing his plan. Kurama stirred in his mind, the fox's presence a steadying force. I know, Kit, but you have to be careful. One wrong move and everything could fall apart. Naruto nodded, his resolve hardening. I've been thinking, what if I set a trap? Something that would force Danzo's hand without revealing my involvement. I could use the information I've gathered to tip off the right people, make it look like Danzo's plans were exposed by someone else. Kurama was silent for a moment, considering the idea. It's risky, but it could work. You'd have to be precise, make sure there's no way to trace it back to you. I'll be careful, Naruto assured him. But I can't just sit here and do nothing. Uzushiogakare's survival depends on this. With his plan set in motion, Naruto began working in secret, carefully crafting the information he would leak. He knew that Danzo had his fingers in many pies, but he also knew that the man was paranoid, always looking over his shoulder for potential threats. If Naruto could play on that paranoia, make Danzo believe that his plans had been discovered by an unknown source, it could be enough to disrupt the attack on Uzushiogakure. Naruto worked late into the night, using his knowledge of seals to create an untraceable message that would be delivered to the right people. He encoded the information in a way that only a few would be able to decipher, ensuring that it would reach the right hands without raising suspicion. When he was finally done, Naruto leaned back, exhaustion weighing heavily on him. But he couldn't rest yet. The next step was just as crucial, delivering the message without being detected. The next morning, in Konoha, Naruto moved through Konoha with practiced ease, blending in with the crowds as he made his way to his destination. The village was bustling with activity, the war casting a heavy shadow over everything, but life went on. People went about their daily routines, children played in the streets, and shinobi moved in and out of the village on missions. Naruto knew exactly where to go. He had spent years in Konoha, both in his original timeline and now in this one, and he knew the ins and outs of the village like the back of his hand. He made his way to the small shop run by an old contact of Jiraiya's, a man who had connections to the more discreet channels of information in the village. The shop was a nondescript building tucked away in a quiet corner of the village, its windows dusty and its door creaking on rusty hinges. Naruto slipped inside, the bell above the door jangling softly as he entered. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of incense and old paper. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with sharp eyes and a hunched back, looked up from behind the counter as Naruto approached. He didn't say a word, but there was a knowing look in his eyes as he nodded in greeting. Naruto reached into his pouch and pulled out the sealed scroll he had prepared, placing it on the counter. The shopkeeper's eyes flicked to the scroll, then back to Naruto. There was a silent understanding between them, no words were needed. The old man picked up the scroll, examining the seal briefly before nodding. "It will be delivered," he said, his voice raspy from years of disuse. Naruto nodded in return, slipping a few coins onto the counter before turning to leave. As he walked out of the shop, he couldn't help but feel a surge of anxiety. This was a calculated risk, but it was still a risk. If anything went wrong, it could spell disaster. But there was no turning back now. The message would reach the right hands, and with any luck, it would be enough to disrupt Danzo's plans without implicating Naruto. He had done everything he could to ensure the safety of Uzushiogakure and Konoha. Now, all he could do was wait and hope that his efforts would pay off. Later that night, in the Senju compound, Naruto returned to the Senju compound under the cover of darkness, his heart still pounding from the tension of the day. He had spent the rest of the afternoon training with Jiraiya and the others, forcing himself to focus on the drills and exercises to keep his mind from spiraling into worry. But as night fell, the weight of his actions settled heavily on his shoulders. He knew he had made the right choice, there was no other way to protect Uzushiogakure without risking the timeline, but the uncertainty of what would happen next gnawed at him. Kurama's presence was a comforting weight in the back of his mind, the fox's calm demeanor helping to steady Naruto's nerves. "You did everything you could, Kit. Now it's out of your hands." "I know," Naruto replied, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "But I can't help worrying. There's so much at stake." Kurama rumbled softly, his tone soothing. "You're not alone in this. We're with you, every step of the way." Naruto smiled faintly, feeling a sense of gratitude for the bond he shared with the tailed beasts. "Thanks, Kurama. I needed to hear that." As Naruto settled into bed, his mind still buzzing with thoughts of the days to come, he knew that he had done everything in his power to protect those he cared about. The trap had been set, the pieces were in place, and now all he could do was wait and see how Danzo would react. But no matter what happened next, Naruto was ready. He had faced impossible odds before, and he would do it again if necessary. Uzushiogakure and Konoha were worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, and Naruto would see this through to the end. In the following days, the tension in the air was palpable as rumors began to circulate through the village. Whispers of a plot uncovered, plans foiled before they could be set in motion. Naruto listened carefully to the murmurs, his heart pounding with anticipation as he waited for confirmation that his plan had worked. And then, one day, the news came. A high-ranking shinobi in Danzo's root organization had been implicated in a plot against Uzushiogakure, and the evidence was damning. Danzo, ever the master of deception, distanced himself from the incident, claiming ignorance of the plot. But the damage was done, the attack on Uzushiogakure had been called off, the risk of destruction averted. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief, the tension in his chest easing slightly. The plan had worked. Uzushiogakure was safe, at least for now. But Naruto knew that this was only a temporary victory. Danzo was not a man to be easily thwarted, and he would undoubtedly regroup and come up with a new plan. Naruto would have to remain vigilant, always watching, always ready to act if necessary. Back in the Senju compound. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the compound as Naruto sat by the koi pond, watching the fish swim lazily beneath the surface. The day had been long, but the weight on his shoulders had eased somewhat. For now, things were calm, and Naruto was determined to make the most of it. Kushina joined him, sitting down beside him with a contented sigh. "It's been a good day, hasn't it?" Naruto smiled, nodding. "Yeah, it has. Sometimes it's nice to just be." Kushina glanced at him, her expression softening. "You've been working really hard, Ni-san. You deserve a break." Naruto chuckled, his heart warming at her words. "Thanks, Ne-chan. But you know I can't rest for too long. There's still a lot to do." Kushina frowned slightly but nodded in understanding. Just promise me you won't take everything on by yourself, okay? We're in this together. Naruto looked at her, his heart swelling with affection. I promise. They sat in companionable silence, watching the koi swim in the pond as the sun dipped below the horizon. The world outside the compound was still filled with dangers, but for now, Naruto allowed himself to relax, to take in the beauty of the moment. He had protected Uzushiogakure and Konoha, at least for now. The timeline was still intact, and the future was still uncertain, but Naruto was ready to face whatever came next. With his loved ones by his side, he knew that he could overcome any obstacle, defeat any enemy. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Naruto felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had done what was necessary, and he would continue to do so, no matter the cost. Because that's what it meant to be a shinobi, to protect those you care about, even if it meant walking a difficult path.